Tuesday, August 17, 2021. May we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Deputy Clerk, may we start off with a roll call?
Yes. Councilman Cahoon,
I'm here.
Councilman Morato,
Here.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Here.
Councilwoman Souza,
Here.
and Council President Brito.
Here. Next item, please.
We have
Consent.
approved the consent calendar.
Mr. President, before we do that, may I suggest that we seal the minutes from executive session?
So we have a motion on the floor at this point in time to seal the minutes for executive session. Would anyone like to second that motion?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilman Cahoon, Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President.
Aye.
And Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
and Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please, which would
We
be
have-
the consent
We
calendar.
have, yep. We're gonna approve
Would anyone like to
the
make a
consent
motion at this point in time
Move to approve.
approve?
Second.
We have a motion. It's been seconded. Roll call.
calendar? Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next item, please.
So we have the tax abatements and previously approved. Do you want to read in the previously approved permits and licenses?
I don't
Mr.
think.
President,
Yes.
we don't need to read out the consent agenda. It's as listed.
Okay,
I would
very good.
recommend we move to Section 5, licenses requiring public hearings and non-public hearings. First, Section A, licenses not requiring a public hearing. I believe it's little I.
Yep. So we have the application for a kennel license. The business name is Fairway Farms, and the business type is a dog center.
Is the applicant present at this point in time? Okay. Do they have all their paperwork in? Any questions concerned with respect
As far
to?
as I know, everything.
Okay.
Everything is in. Subsequent to city approval, DEM will come out and DEM will issue an approval, is my understanding. At that point in time, the business can become operable.
Okay, very good.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Is this in a residential neighborhood, this Edmond Street?
Can you approach the podium, please, ma'am?
You just have your name and address for the record.
Just put that mic on, there's a button there.
Yep.
Good. So is Edmond Street in a residential neighborhood?
No.
It's not. Just double checking.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So this is a kennel.
It's not, it's a training center. We do dog training for, it's pretty much it. It's not like an overnight boarding kennel or any of that. It's day trips. They drop their dogs off. We do training, some daycare, but it's a training-based center.
Okay. Why I'm asking is I think this is a good thing. I've always heard from a lot of people that we don't have enough facilities like that, either a kennel or dog or animal training. So if everything's in order, it's something that I'm glad to see come here.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'd move approval.
Just one, what is the square footage of the facility?
It is, God, do you have the paper?
So is it is it large?
It's big.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so
it's
you're
very
gonna have
big.
large dogs, small dogs?
Yes.
Is it
yes, They're
outdoor?
separated. No, it's indoor. They're separated by, there's not too many dogs that come because we're all trainers. So we come in, we take them in. Usually there's not many more than like 20 dogs and we are working with them throughout the day. And they're separated by size and personality, behavior, that type of thing. And the ratio to staff to dog is like 1 to 10. Usually it's one-on-one services because we're teaching them. You know what I mean?
Okay, so it's primarily by appointment?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other further questions? So we do have a motion on the floor at this point in time by Councilman Rodrick. Would anyone like to second that
I'll
motion?
second that.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote on that?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
and Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
Next
Thank you.
application, please.
Is applications for dance and entertainment license. The business name is Lane's Food Company. It's doing business as Greg's Restaurant.
All the records, everything we have in place at this point in time?
Yes.
Mr. Assistant City Solicitor, you have any questions with respect to the applicant or concerns?
No, there are no questions or
Okay, we
concerns
have all the
regarding this.
records at the pleasure of the council. Anyone have any questions or concerns? The applicant present at this time? Okay.
So I just have a couple of questions.
Please approach.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. H. Robert Bacon, 891 South Road, East Greenwich, Rhode Island.
Mr. Bacon, so you say light music. What type of light music?
Like one-person guitar, singing, that type of thing.
And that's weekends, daily?
Probably just 1 or 2 nights a week. We're thinking sometime in the Thursday through Sunday range. We've done some trivia later in the night on Wednesday, and it's been well received. And so a couple of our guests asked for some music nights. So
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Better than the overhead satellite, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that.
Any other further question from the council?
Move approval.
Okay.
Second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you, sir. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Welcome. Next application, please.
It's for wrecking and towing services for a license. It's Scorpio Towing.
Mr. Assistant City Solicitor, you want to jump in on this, please?
Mr. President, I believe the applicant's here. If they would want to come forward, I can kind of set the landscape a little bit. Having a conversation with the licensing clerk earlier this afternoon, it's my understanding that everything is in order with the exception of there's a requirement that the wreckage services have a real estate interest within the city of East Providence. They currently do not have that. It's my understanding that they do have a conditional agreement that if this council were to approve the application and the rest of the city departments would approve the application in its due course, then they would acquire the license. So the most the council could do this evening would be grant a pending approval, which would require proof of the necessary real estate within the city of East Providence. The council can designate that review to myself or the police chief. I would probably be relying on the chief to do, or a member of the police department to do a site visit to tell me that it conforms to all of the standards that are appropriate. And then I could take a look at the lease or whatever land transaction to confirm that they do have a controlling land interest in order to qualify for the tow list. The other thing I will say is if they have land for a day and then the lease ends, so does their place on the tow list. They have to have the land in East Providence the entire time to qualify to be on the tow list.
At the pleasure of the council.
So can I just go, so this is asking for a tow license, not necessarily to be on the tow list. That's done separately.
So my understanding is that it was the application for placement on the tow list. They do have a license already to operate.
In the city?
They have a license where their main portion of operations, I believe, is in Pawtucket,
No, we have Providence.
Providence.
Yes,
So, and you have the state license. Your headquarters are in Providence.
yes.
And so you're just seeking for the tow list eligibility in East Providence, not a business license. You already have your
Yes.
business license from the city of Providence.
But I think it does not, I don't know if the ordinance, I'm not reading it correctly. It says that they should have a established yard and business within the city.
So
Because
the-
other tow companies, I know a couple of years ago, off of Dexter Road, a company came in and applied for a license within the city, but it wasn't a tow license to be on the tow list. It was a license, a records license for the city, as to have property on the city and to operate as an operating wrecker tow company in the city. So you're not looking to operate a business in the city as a wrecker in our city?
No,
You just want to get on our
the
police
tow list.
department?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually did acquire a property in East Providence. It's a 101 Commercial Way. I have everything set in motion pending your approval and the city's approval. If everything goes well, a fence will be put up, signs will be put up, and it'll be locked, secured by the end of the week.
Do you mind just your name's address and affiliation with the application for the record?
My name's Chris Bradley, 91 Berkeley Street, East Providence, and I'm a representative of Scorpio Towing.
That button's green.
Yeah, it's great.
How did you, I'm sorry.
My name's Michael Pickering, 20 Bora Street, North Providence, and I'm the manager of the company.
So you guys are already told, you're on a toll list for Providence?
Yes, we have multiple police departments that we tow for. We tow for Warwick, North Providence, and Providence.
How'd you hear about East Providence? Just,
I
Chris,
used
my
to
employee,
tow,
lives in East Providence.
and I used to tow for the East Providence Police Department when East Providence Towing was open.
And we're just looking to expand the company and
So I guess my only reservation is one, not having the already needed property on the city that would
Yes.
require you to get on the licensing. And two, not actually being an operating business within the city, right? We have other tow companies within the city that I'm sure would like to get on the list too. But last time someone was added to the list, the chief at the time already said that they were kind of maxed out on how many tow trucks companies they needed
Yeah.
for the city, because then, the more you put on, the less work gets distributed. And, you guys, as you've mentioned, work with other municipalities, and some of our companies in the city only work with our city. So you'd be essentially taking bread off their table, which is fine. Everybody has a right to make a living, right? But they have vested interest in the city because they're business owners and landowners and operate with our community. So I have reservations for that. Personally, my reservations for having on the toll list is your reviews. After looking at your reviews, it wasn't, very reassuring, unfortunately, for the community that you would be serving, that people that work for your company would be treating our customers, our residents, well. So that's another concern that I have.
Yes,
And those are things that I look into with any business coming into the city, or that I would use myself. And I know the city has had issues with other tow companies in the city on the police list that have had to come off the police list. And if you've been in the city for a long time and have worked for you know what I'm talking about. So I'm not trying to backpedal and have a situation where then we'd have to come back and be like, you know what, this isn't working out.
now also those reviews were also, I just recently became manager of the company. It was an old manager that he ended up getting let go. So he destroyed the company.
Well, this was within the last year, these
Oh,
reviews.
okay. Well,
So I don't know when you picked up the
it was the beginning of the
mandatory.
year that I became the manager.
Sure.
Any other further
Slippery
questions?
slope.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So it's not, it's, I'm looking out for the best interest of the people that I serve in the city. And I know it's
course.
not
Yes.
particularly you guys that are behind the truck doing these things, but it is a reflection of the company as a whole.
Yes.
Any other further questions?
Is there a recommendation from the police chief or the police department?
I don't have an affirmative recommendation one way or the other. I just know that they did meet all of the application requirements, and then some.
Except for having property,
So, yes.
which is part of the ordinance, so that's not meeting.
Can I ask a question as far as, you just mentioned that they beat all the other application processes. What other, can the council know what the other applicants were and how many were they and when this went out to bid or what the process was?
So the process is section 8-523 procedure for licensing, and it's any person desiring to operate a record or towing service in the city shall first be required to complete an application form. It goes on to give the information that you need in the application form, a fee of $25. And so then section 8-524 is qualification for listing. This is the language where the final clause says any such record service must be located within the corporate city limits of the city and shall have been regularly engaged in such business for at least 6 months. So we have no concerns regarding their operation of a business for at least 6 months. The question was whether or not they had property in the city. They're not eligible to receive a license until that occurs. I would say that it's comparable to, we just had the kennel, which subsequent to our approval, they need to get a DEM permit before the license issues.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
But the question is, were there other applicants? And to someone's council question, did this chief of police, the police department, have a need for another, like, tow truck company? Like, how did this come to be?
I can't speak to whether or not the The chief requested any applications. There's no limit to when and how you can apply. The procedure for licensing and qualification for listing are set forth by city ordinance.
Yeah.
They seem to have checked all boxes
Except for the.
with the conditional interest in land.
So the way I read this, I'm sorry, Councilman, the way I read this, though, that last line, any such wreck or service must be located within the corporate limits of the city and shall have been regularly engaged in business for at least 6 months. The way I read that is that they've been in business within the city corporate limits for at least 6 months,
Sure.
not nationally, not statewide.
So the way I would read that is it's two separate clauses. So the first requirement is that the record service must be located within the corporate limits of the city. The second is that the record service shall have been regularly engaged in such business, which is a licensed record firm, for at least 6 months. I don't read them as conjunctive that they must, that
But they're in the
business
same
has to
second.
be in the city for
Right.
for 6 months now.
That's how I read it.
But there are no other applicants.
To my knowledge, no.
Well, if the requirement is that they have to have property and they will not be issued that license until then, where do we go from here?
The most this council can do can issue a pending approval requiring, which is the completion of all approvals from the police department. We will check the location, that they actually have the lease, that it's zoned properly at that location. So there's a bit of a rundown we need to do to confirm that they're eligible, but they cannot operate until we issue the license, and we will not issue the license until we've confirmed that they've met every standard.
The only other question I'll ask the company, you said your purchase of this land is pending city approval. So if for some reason you were not to get this approval, are you going to go ahead and purchase that property or?
Most likely we will. It gives us a wider range. I do have it set up, as I said, for the end of the week to be all set up.
But we also do have multiple properties
Yeah.
lined up. This one, we're not just relying on just the one property, but we would like to get this property, which is already in the works for the property.
And what is the use of the property? Storing towed
Just storing the
vehicles?
vehicles for the East Providence police tows.
For the police department? What about
Yeah.
an accident or a private
Oh,
party?
yeah, we'd use it for that too. Just anything that would happen in East Providence,
Mhm.
we would bring right. to it.
AAA could bring a car there for some reason if it was.
Anything, AAA can
Disabled.
pick up vehicles from there, would have someone down at the yard just to be able to release the
Mhm.
vehicles during normal business hours.
Are you guys leasing or purchasing that?
We're gonna be leasing the property.
Is there an office on that property?
To my knowledge, the person I will be renting the property from has an office. For us, there will not be an office. We can come back and forth. We have no issue with that. As far as releasing vehicles, anything like that, the yard will be secured and locked under
24-hour
surveillance.
surveillance and everything.
Under surveillance. And, excuse me, other than that, there's really no need for an office at the yard, just because for the sole purpose of storage only for the police tows. Other than that, I know there are other tow companies on the property that rent from him as well. So as far as zoning, I don't see an issue, but that's on your guys' job, not I. I just know that there's
There is
about three
multiple tow yards.
other tow yards there, all mobile, East Providence Towing and Recovery, and Advanced Towing. And the property is big enough for more yards. So.
And will approximately fit 15 to 20 cars in this lot.
Well, with that, I make a motion for approval with the conditions mentioned by our assistant solicitor of the acquiring that property. You will look at the lease agreement, correct? Make sure it's not a one-day agreement.
I will.
And every other test that needs to be passed as far as the police department.
We'll confirm everything. They won't be able to operate until I'm able to confirm everything.
Yes.
So may I just ask, as far as just the lease agreement that we need to present to you, what else would we need? That would be it?
You would take that up with is it with the police department or?
Right.
Yeah.
If you call the licensing clerk in the morning, she can get a hold of me and I'll connect by email and we'll sort it all out.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
So we have a motion on the floor at this point.
So,
Right,
Mr.
based-
President, I will second the pending approval, which is conditional upon confirmation of eligibility by
So
the
we-
solicitor's office.
We do have a motion. We have a second on that motion, and now we'll go with a roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Nay, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, and because
Understandable.
you don't have an established business here in the city yet.
Yes,
Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you.
thank you.
Next applicant, please.
One-day entertainment licenses. It's for Tara Machado at 79 Narragansett Avenue.
Okay. They have all their paperwork in the application.
Yes.
Any issues, concerns, problems at the pleasure of the council? Anybody have any
Move to approve.
questions?
Second.
We have a motion approval, seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
A one-day entertainment license for Leanne Aldrich on behalf of the Elks Club.
They have all the information on file.
They do.
No questions, no concerns. At the pleasure of the council.
Move to approve.
Anyone like to second that approval?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, next item.
One-day entertainment for Silvestri Cardozo on behalf of another Elks Club.
They have all the information submitted into
They
the
do.
clerk's office. Okay, at the pleasure of the council.
I think it all depends on what football game they intend to televise.
And I would move approval, but a curious question, do we have to do this to put a television outside and watch a game? I mean, it seems like, so is this a precedent we're setting where every little club, or what about a home, somebody, I know, I have some relatives, they put out a 65-inch screen outside in the backyard and they watch games and have cookout. And is this really necessary? I guess it is, so we wouldn't be asked.
It's a great question. The Department of Business Regulations recognized standard for anything that qualifies as entertainment is any amplified sound that can be heard outside the four walls of a premise. So I bet every single living person in Rhode Island has violated the standard for entertainment hundreds of times in their life. And that's the definition that we're stuck with.
Let's go through the motions anyway, just to save
Yeah,
them the
no,
headaches.
I'd move approval as long as the New York Giants are not being shown. on
Would anyone-
second.
All right,
No,
we have a
I'll
motion
I'll move approval.
by Councilman Rodman, second by Councilman Morato. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Right.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next applicant, please.
Another one-day entertainment license for Joel Osborne. It's for a block party.
You have all your information on file?
We do.
Okay, at the pleasure of the council.
Move to approve.
Second.
That's a split. right there.
All right.
Roll call vote. Give it to whomever.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Okay, moving right along to applications for special events, alcohol beverages.
Okay, we have the applicant Marcy Mello. She represents the East Providence Elks Club, number 2337 at 60 Berkeley Street. Family fun day event.
Okay, they have all their paperwork on file.
They do.
At the pleasure of the council. Have any
Mr. President,
Yes.
I believe the next three items are public hearing.
hearing?
So we do need a request if anyone in the public is here to address them.
Okay. The applicant present at this point in time? Or representative? Is the applicant present or representative? Okay, with that being said,
This is a
Or
public
nothing?
hearing.
this is a public hearing and anybody wishing, well, let me, the council, you have any questions? or concerns
My only
regarding
comment is, and I'm not a member of the Elks Club, but I would say I'm familiar with all the great work they do, the volunteerism, donating funds and support and all kinds of activities for handicapped persons, for other entities, schools, groups. So would certainly support this one-time family day event wholeheartedly.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so anyone wishing to speak for or against this application, please approach the podium. With no one approaching the podium, public comment is now, or public hearing is now closed. We'll proceed at this point in time with a vote.
Move to approve.
Second. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next application, please.
It's for a victualling license for Wise Guys Pizza on Willett Avenue.
Again, this is a public hearing at the pleasure of the council. Anyone have any questions? Is the applicant present at this point in time? Okay, anyone have questions for the applicant? No one has questions for the applicant. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this application, please approach the podium. With no one approaching the podium, public hearing is now closed. Leave it at the pleasure of the council for a vote.
Move to approve. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next, please.
Ryan Wizdowski for Subway.
88 Newport Avenue.
Yep.
This is yes, this is a public hearing as well. At the pleasure of the council. Does the council have any questions or concerns? No, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this, please approach the podium. If not, public hearing is now closed. I'll leave it at the pleasure of the council. Anyone like to vote for or against this?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
Application for holiday sales. And this is Wise Guys Pizza at 467 Willett Avenue.
Okay. At the pleasure of the council.
Move to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
Licenses requiring public hearing for a full privilege liquor license, which would be Cafe Zara.
Okay. At the pleasure of the council. Is the applicant present at this point in time? Okay. Council have any questions?
This went through the process with the State House and all that, and it got approved.
I was able to confirm that the law passed.
Yeah.
Again, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this, please approach the podium. With no one approaching the podium,
There's somebody.
oh, please approach, sir. State your name and address for the record, sir.
George Mannion, 236 Pleasant Street, Providence. I'm the major abutter to that property. I own 24 Ivy Street, the building behind the parking lot. And I just want to approve this. I think it's important to do whatever we can to help a business stay in business. And they've been running the cafe very nicely. I would assume it'll be run very well.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure they appreciate your support.
And thank you for coming and saying that.
Anyone wish to speak for or against this, please approach your podium. If not, public hearing is now closed. At the pleasure of the council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. With that being said, we remain on page 5 for those of you who are following along with us. Where proclamations and presentations, which there is none. Moving right along to communications.
We have Phil Terrell, and he's speaking on the transfer of land to the city to be improved as a hammerhead on Violin Avenue.
Mr. Terrell?
Good evening, Mr. President. Attorney John Shikachi for the applicant.
Good evening, sir.
Mr. Terrell is here if the board has any questions.
Okay.
This
Can you
is,
just give us a brief description as to what you're looking to achieve?
sure, this was a previously approved subdivision, and one of the conditions was that a hammerhead had to be created and dedicated to the city. The previous attorney put a deed on record, thinking that was the proper procedure, and the planning department put a note to us in the land evidence record saying that the proper way is to go before your honorable council and have the hammerhead accepted. So that's what we're here this evening, asking that it be accepted and more or less retroactively accepting the approval of the planning board's extension.
For the public, can you just describe what a hammerhead is?
It's basically a paved turnaround in the public, partly on the public right of way and partly on the private property, which would be dedicated to the town so that emergency vehicles and pedestrians can turn around and come back out for safety.
Okay, at the pleasure of the council. Anyone have any questions? This is not on for a vote. Right?
It's not. It's just designated as communications. Given the presentation this evening, we could waive appearance when we do post for a formal vote. And in the interim, I can confirm that everything's in place, that it meets all the city standards, and we can go from there.
Okay.
I don't know if we should waive the appearance just in case someone wants to speak for or against it, right? And they lose that opportunity.
Entirely up to the council.
So I say keep it as an appearance just in case. I don't have any issue with it, but some neighbor or something might come up and then we'll just further delay it at that point. So might as well just.
Yeah, we're more than happy to address any concerns the neighbors may have, looking for the city to accept it.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm here for any
Very
questions.
good, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item under communications is Samantha Burnett, lack of ADA and equal opportunity affirmative action resources and protection against discrimination in the city of East Providence for employees.
Ms. Burnett?
Good evening. I stand here today as your constituent, your employee, your appointment, and to some of you, my friend. I know there's a lot of risk by doing this, so I hope that you can understand how much courage and strength this took based on that. I know you could all vote me out, and I know I can be out of a job, and I get that, but I want to change, and I'm willing to risk my own job trying. For the past 2 years, I took my department to new heights, ensuring we had services for the disabled and the homebound easily accessible. I implemented web-based services with a 24/7 availability, and our residents, regardless of disability or time constraints, never needed to leave their home to access information anymore. These programs were at no additional cost to the taxpayers, and we are forecasted to end the fiscal year amidst a pandemic and closures 100,000 ahead of the previous year in revenue. No fees increased or added, no additional cost to the taxpayer. 100,000 additional revenue that will likely be a new constant for the city year after year. With your support, we made it better together, and I continue to strive and make sure no one is overlooked or left behind. But now I find myself needing supplemental support from you. Recently, I found that I needed support because of my own disability. I live with dyslexia, and I have since I was 12 years old. The coping mechanisms that I've been using suddenly weren't enough. I needed some help to continue to be successful. And it's humbling, but I knew I needed it. I had to go through the administration who responded that they basically didn't accept my disability, regardless of the ADA accommodation form signed by my physician of almost a decade under his care. They told me I needed to see a physician of their choice to confirm that I have dyslexia. My physician's note wasn't enough. The ADA accommodation form was not enough. So now I have to go to a physician of the city's choice, which I do not know and have not chosen, to examine me now. That's dignified, right? The city does have a right under the law to do this, but they don't have to, as I was told by an agency specializing in disabilities in Rhode Island, and that this is indeed excessive on their part. This is now going to cost the taxpayers additional money in paying for a doctor that will only confirm that I have a condition that I've had for over 31 years. And you know what I asked for an accommodation? A form, questions that I put together and designed. I asked for a form to help keep the mayor's communication organized for the council docket. I met with Councilman Cahoon, Council President Brito, who agreed this was reasonable and asked our city solicitor, Mike Marcello, to work with the administration. And the administration still refused. Our Director of Administration, who is currently our Human Resources Director, Napoleon Gonsalves, responded that he didn't feel it necessary to change. These are all facts and they are documented. It has been almost 50 days since I turned in my ADA accommodation form. There have been no accommodations made. Now, there is another city employee who openly disclosed that they had a non-visible disability. Many accommodations, including a modified work schedule, were made without needing to prove a disability. No paperwork, no doctor's signature, no doctor of the city's choosing, accommodations taken care of within a few days. This is also documented, factual, and given to me firsthand. The Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 12112, protects employees against this very exact type of discrimination. Last week, I sent an email to the council asking for one final request for help. Maybe you were advised to not respond by the administration or by the city solicitor. But for the exception of Councilman Morato, you were all silent, and I don't know why. With no other options and a heavy heart, I filed for medical leave of absence, which I'm currently on. I need the city to afford myself and the employees of the city with dignity, resources, and timely response that they are bound to by federal, state laws, and even in our own employee handbook. They committed to this, and it's time to see that promise and law upheld, not in the way that they interpret it, but the way it should be, which is just and right. Disability accommodation should never be about a political agenda. It also should not be about settling a score, but it's happening. We need to start using principles about personnel and start doing the right thing. Take the political alliances aside and start committing to change. Over the last few days, I've spoken with Councilman Cohn and Councilwoman Souza. I want to come back to work. I love my job. And regardless of how crazy things can get, I love serving you and the people of East Providence. It is ingrained in the fabric of my being now. Help me get this accommodation and ask the administration to stop discriminating. There are many other employees that have to stay quiet and they've been denied equal treatment. Just please help us. How can you help? I'm not asking for you to interfere with personnel. That's a compromise of the charter, and I would never want you guys to do that. But what I'm asking is for help. Help us with true resources that will advocate for everyone. Include in our budget for an independent ADA coordinator, an EEOC, and affirmative action officer. Create an independent department that is impenetrable by local politics. We can actually receive federal funding for these positions. These are both positions that should have no political intimidation or interference and should be federally regulated. Did you know that our current EEOC and affirmative action officer cannot help you if you come to him with a concern about the administration discriminating in the workplace? He is silenced by intimidation by the administration. Do you know what this means? The mayor and his administration are free to discriminate against race, religion, disability, gender identification, and more with no consequence. There's no accountability, and it's happening. It's happening right now, and I'm currently going through that. We aren't okay. I say this for many city employees that want to speak and cannot out of fear of losing their job. One day, your children or grandchildren might work for the city. Create the change now so they don't have to go through this. You were given an opportunity to change this. And now, if it isn't, generations will continue to be paying for the paralysis of justice happening on your clock. You all have a power to legislate, change processes, and end this wretched cycle that has lasted way too long. I have ideas. I have solutions. I have a great, insane amount of hope that this can and will change. I am not downtrodden. I am professional enough to want to work with the administration and create process flows that end this, but I need all of your support. And there's a lot more than just me asking for this. Let's get better together. Please help me and help our community become more aware and advocating for people who have disabilities so we can put away moments of discrimination and end the shaming into violence by the administration. Thank you.
Mr. President?
Hold
Yes.
on one second. There's no rebuttal. I'm going to refuse a rebuttal. If you're coming up for that, I'm going to call a point of order. There's a communication, and that's where it ends. So I will call a point of order on that.
Mr. Dillon.
Mr. President, there are some allegations that were just made there, and I would request to be able to respond to the extent that they impose liability and make statements of fact. I think it's important that the record be clear and not get set by only one portion of the conversation being heard this evening. I think to the point of the presentation, there are two critical notes. The first is the city does have the authority to request for an IME, an independent medical exam. It's a common practice. It's built into, I believe, every single collective bargaining agreement we have in the city. The other issue that I believe was identified is that this council doesn't have the ability to interfere with personnel issues. So to the extent that this council is unable to respond to a specific request, it is actually the charter that prevents you from responding to specific personnel requests. There are very well documented processes and procedures for these sorts of applications. To the extent that they are not followed correctly, I welcome any and all documentation and evidence, and we will take that. We'll review it. We'll make sure that all the processes that must be followed by law are followed by law. I have no evidence to the contrary as I sit here this evening. And again, I'm very happy to receive documentation that says otherwise. To the extent that there are people that are allegedly concerned about retaliation, public employees, and I believe we learned this through a relatively high-profile federal case in the city of East Providence about 5 or 6 years ago. Public employees all have an entitlement to their job. There can be no adverse employment action taken against them without due process. A portion of that due process would root out any potential for retaliation. A person would have the ability to say that I am experiencing this adverse employment action because I'm being retaliated against. That would certainly include anyone that is a member of a union and department heads to a degree. Now, department heads that were appointed after the charter changes have a different level of protection than department heads that were appointed prior to the charter changes. So there's a slight distinction there. But there is no employee within the city of East Providence that is vulnerable to retaliation without having a due process of law that will certainly make them whole. And I think that is both in the best interest of the city, and it's a practice that we follow because it's the right thing to do, and it's a practice that we follow because we have to do it. I believe that addresses sort of the main facts presented this evening. But if there are questions as to procedure and those sorts of concerns, I am not fully vetted and up to date on exactly what the application situation was and what processes and procedures would be applicable, but would be happy to look into them and come to a more definitive response when and if the time is appropriate.
So as an appointed employee, Assistant Solicitor Conley, where does, and I report to the council, my bosses are the council, right?
You're appointed by the council. You have dual roles that are performed on behalf of the council and as a member of the administration.
So if I have no protection and they can't get involved in the personnel matters, and it's the administration that's discriminating, say the gentleman to my right, Napoleon Gonsalves, for the record, and the mayor, and members, basically his entire administration, and I don't have protection, where do I go from that?
Discrimination is subject to specific classes. If you are a protected class in the United States of America, you cannot be discriminated against, period. Presentation of information to substantiate that is something that the city would review. The solicitor's office represents the city of East Providence. It does not de facto represent only the council, only the mayor. We represent the city of East Providence by and through those elected bodies. We would be underneath our duty and obligation to come to the truth and figure out what to do next.
So as a person with a disability and a person who is a woman of color, I think I'm a class. right? A protected
You
class.
may be a protected class without documentation, without an actual look at what are the processes and procedures are applicable.
Mhm.
I don't want to give definitive answers this evening.
Sure.
I have nothing in front of me.
I understand. I get that. I appreciate it. This is more answers that I've actually gotten. So at this point, I'm just trying to clarify this because I get silence from the administration. There is no protection from the administration. They're a very hostile group. But if they can't answer and do anything and the administration doesn't, and I'm an employee and I don't have a union representation or anything like that, what happens to me? What do I get? Where do I go?
I think we're making generalizations about a relatively complex topic, and we're doing it live during a public hearing, and you are not represented by legal counsel. And I do not believe that is in the best interest of any party involved.
Nobody ever answers my emails anymore. So I just don't know what to do at this point. I mean, when it talks about an IME, we talk about having an IME, which is fine. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. Like I said earlier, that's their right. The city has that right. But I still haven't received that from anybody. I mean, it's stalemate at this point. So I'm saying, this is me kind of saying openly and publicly, I need help, and there's no help. So what do you do as an employee? These guys can't even talk. They can't even stand up for me, and they appointed me. So, I mean, yeah.
There are processes and procedures in place. If there are violations of those processes and procedures, there are bodies that you can report to. There are government bodies, state bodies that overlook these scenarios and situations. You can apply for relief there.
Right.
There is options for relief for every employed person in the state of Rhode Island.
Right. So there's no protection under the city for me whatsoever as an employee.
I can't speak to exactly what you're alleging. I don't know what violations you're alleging. I have no documents that affect one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So as it pertains to getting an independent exam, how does the city go about choosing which employees get that and which do not?
I don't believe that that's how the process works. I believe that the vast majority of the cases are driven by a collective bargaining agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So a collective bargaining agreement would have a step-by-step, this is exactly how it's happening.
So for those employees that do not fall under that category of a collective bargain agreement, how would that process work?
So it would default to employment contract, state law, and federal law. So it would be some blend of that overlap. So when I say we're talking about a relatively complicated situation and the individual is not represented by counsel and I don't have any documentation in front of me, the reason why I cannot respond is because I do not know if there's an employment contract. I do not know if there is a default to an applicable state law. Maybe there's an applicable city ordinance. Maybe there's applicable federal law. For me to answer that question definitively takes time and research, and I need concrete facts. I have none of those things right now. So we are doing the incredibly precarious dance of lofting hypotheticals about a real life situation that's standing in front of us.
Well, I think the other issue standing in front of us is now the city clerk now on an active leave, as she says. So where, as a council, do we go? I mean, I understand we have our deputy clerk, which thank you for being here today. Okay. It's very complicated.
Dylan, I'd like to, and to your point, and given that we're discussing hypotheticals and that we don't want to go too far out of bounds, I think that Sam raised a particularly compelling point to me, and that is with regard to if there is a case of another city employee who was afforded an accommodation by way of a less restrictive pathway, I certainly would like to know that information. So I'm asking that on the record. I know you can't answer me that now, but I am asking to, and I don't want the employee's name or the employee's details, and I know I don't have the right to ask for that. But now, with regard to the process by which an employee outside of a collective bargaining agreement can allege discrimination. When I worked for the state, there was an on-site person who would basically be the gateway into, into that type of a complaint. And then, that complaint would not stop with that person. That person would take it to the appropriate level at the next, whatever that might be. Do those procedures exist within the city of East Providence whereby an employee can go to a certain designated and known person, make the complaint and get relief?
Yes.
Okay. And presumably that person is Elmer Pena for the most part. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But there is no ADA point person. So I just wanted to publicly reach out one last time and see if there's anything that the city could do. And, you're right, I don't have representation. I imagine soon I will, but this was me publicly asking one more time.
At the request of the Assistant City Solicitor, we prefer not to have any rebuttal at this point in time.
I believe the request was from the counselor.
That is correct.
But I don't object to the counselor's request, but it is the council president's meeting.
Mhm. So I'll leave that at the pleasure of the council.
Can I just, a hypothetical, we're not going to get too involved, but three of us have already spoken, so, on the council, so I'll add something. And hypothetically, if an employee, bargaining unit or otherwise, files a complaint to a local, state, or federal agency, I assume at some point there's a decision made or an opinion rendered. Will that opinion come back to the council? Does the fact that the charter says we can't get involved with personnel, which we've all learned, since activities of a prior council. But do we get any report, any answers, any resolution, any opinions, any?
So there's no requirement that
And I'm not saying the complaints have been filed. I don't know. I've heard that maybe some have. So,
but it would work identically to any other litigation. We would have a meeting in executive session to discuss litigation. And you receive an update in detail from whoever is representing the city's interests at that point in time. To the extent that it is a personnel matter that doesn't rise to the council, there's a procedure in which I believe it would go through a personnel hearing board prior to, after an appeal of an administrative decision. And depending that outcome, there may be litigation. So all of these routes are really vetting a process by which either some accommodation is implemented or there's an appeal until the problem is resolved. I actually think just to identify a process that functions almost identically, it's not the same issue, but just for the value to the general public to understand procedures work, it's comparable to when someone applies for like a disability retirement. And you have a doctor's note saying, yes, this person is disabled. Then the retirement board would say, okay, we're going to have an independent medical exam to confirm as much. And then to what extent, whether or not work can continue to be done or cannot be continued to be done, et cetera. So it is a really well documented process and procedure with very clear rules in place, which is one of the reasons why hearing these allegations, I need documentation so that I can actually see what, if anything, has gone wrong.
thank you.
Any other further questions?
I have a related discussion item, which is item C, page 6. I'm sorry, on the item A, page 6, under paragraph on the traffic issues. the one below it. Can I
Page
bring that one
6,
up?
Page 6, letter C.
Correct.
I have no problem with it. being
Charter
done.
2.9, which reads inquired to the conduct of any office, department, agency. Is that what you're
Yes.
referencing? You want to bring that up at this point in time?
Council doesn't mind.
Not at all.
Okay.
Okay, please proceed.
So I put my thoughts down in regards to this issue. And I started looking at from a different approach. So first of all, I have no desire to engage in personnel matters of the city, but do want to investigate and see where we stand as a city in regards to ADA compliance and service for everyone in our community. It sounds like it's time for us to shine some light on this change based on, current events with our city clerk. For those who may not know, ADA is Americans with Disabilities Act, and until now, I had no idea that the city didn't even have
Counselor.
an ADA.
With great apologies, I must, I believe when I look at agenda item X sub C, there's a citation to the charter section. I do not see any public listing of a potential communication regarding the ADA.
That the reason why it's going to lead up to that, because this agenda item is in connection with what has occurred here and what I'm going to ask the assistant solicitor to look into in regards to ADA.
Underneath the Open Meetings Act, if we can try as best as we possibly can to confine our discussion to Charter 296, if we can at least present it in that manner, then it will be posted
Okay.
such that the public would have a reasonable expectation.
I
that
I
this would-
respect that. I will put this back. I will put this on communications onto that. Madam Assistant Clerk, if you could put for the next council meeting, ADA discussion compliance. And I will get right to the point as to what the agenda item is. So what I'm going to ask, and I appreciate your legal opinion as to what just occurred. But based on a section of the charter referenced in the docket, will you advise me on the following? One, as to what the council needs to do for a full investigation on the status of ADA in regards to our city clerk, Samantha Burnett, affirmative action and EEOC services by department. And also as to why this simple form, which was this form that was presented to the mayor's office by our city clerk, a very simple form and easy to follow, document that would help her or any other person in that position put together a proper docket. Okay, as to why this simple form is being rejected by the mayor. So that's the two charges in regarding that I'm tasking you in regards to my docket item. So, and please keep me posted as to what the findings are as this process goes along.
Absolutely. So I will do research regarding those matters subject to Charter Section 29-6. If the council wishes a briefing on that section of the charter, I'm happy to do it.
See, the issue is not, as I said, I respect your opinion that there are steps that you have to be taking place, but that's a ridiculous excuse by this mayor and this administration. The request for this simple form should be just that by a department head. Utilize it. That's simple. Okay. And if he comes up again, I'm going to use my council rights where he's speaking out of line, and I'm going to vote nay in allowing him to come up and speak.
Mhm.
So I am done with this conversation. Thank you.
So I'll just make one quick observation and conversation that I had with the clerk early on. And I, from my understanding, this is already on the investigation. I don't know if I'm liable to say this or not
So-
at this point in time.
Anytime an item gets posted to the agenda, the solicitor's office looks into it, tries to make a determination of what's happening, and then we start to really compile our research. So to the extent that an item was posted to the agenda and we began to do research into it, yes, that has occurred. in no more detail than that, to my knowledge.
But what I'm referencing is the ACLU.
I do not know.
I'm just saying from what I was told and what was in writing. So therefore, my involvement in this, in a sense of getting involved, was if there's already a case pending or cases pending with the ACLU or EEOC, for an example, with the state. How do we get involved when there's a case pending?
The city has not been able to confirm that there's any case pending anywhere.
Okay. Well, we got a point of order here, so.
I have a point of order. I believe it has to be unanimous to have him speak out of a docket, agenda items, as I just did in respect of the Open Meetings Act. That was not able to read my statement.
I don't want to continue with this because there's a case that's actually well, I don't even know if it's pending, if you said that, but so let's cut this as it is right at this point in time. I would prefer not to go and read into this any further than what was already discussed at this point. I think there's more to this at this point from a legal point of view, that we need to be really careful as to what we say and what we do up here as a council as well. So I apologize, but I'm going to proceed at this point in time that we're going to move this meeting along. Next item, Deputy Clerk.
Public comment?
Public comment. So we have 4 people that signed up for public comment. We have Heather Andre, who was the first one. Please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, I am Heather Andrade, 45 Wampanoag Trail. Good evening. I am Heather Andrade, one of the leaders of the nonprofit group Keep Metacomet Green, whose mission it is to save the green space of Metacomet Golf Course, and now are tasked with saving the Veterans Memorial Parkway from destruction also. Tonight, I would like to address the conversations which have included derogatory name-calling, such as nats, nasty, crooks, harassers, malicious, liars, to name a few, from both sides of this debacle that concerns saving the green space of Metacomet land and now the Veterans Memorial Parkway. I realize that passions run high. I really do. And people get caught up in the moment, whether it is an abutter fighting to make the council actually listen, or a city council person not really getting what residents are saying to them, even though one by one, those residents approach the podium and plead for their community to not be invaded by a developer. They are saying, save this land if you want to listen. The name and sometimes rather nasty statements should not continue. It does no one any good and makes the people who throw out the insults really look childish. Making people feel threatened and scared is not the way to go. Let's get ourselves under control, shall we? And I mean everybody. Thank you.
Next person, please.
Wow. Candy Seal.
Good evening. I'm Candy Seal, 1340 South Broadway, East Providence. I just want to follow up on what Heather has said. Civility, as we all know, my topic is civility this evening. Civility is a delicate issue, and especially when passions are involved. And I understand that everyone gets angry now and then and frustrated. I know you get angry and frustrated. It must be sometime you must feel like you're in a dunk tank and everyone's gunning for you with softballs. But you all know that politics is a very nasty business, or can be, and I would hope that you'd have tough skin. As one politician once told me, who sat in one of these very chairs, he said that politics is not a game of beanbag. It's nasty. You get into it, and you need tough skin. But we get angry on our side too, angry and frustrated. For instance, we came up and pleaded with you, almost begged with you to do anything you could to save the clubhouse at Metacomet. And you said, no, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do about that. So we get angry and frustrated. And then when we talked about eminent domain, no, sorry, we can't afford it. To to my knowledge, nobody looked into any of the opportunities where you might have been able to figure out how to afford it. Malcolm Moore said we couldn't afford it. The mayor said we couldn't afford it. So you said we couldn't afford it. So we get angry and frustrated. When the $8.2 million appraisal came from Metacomet, did any one of you ask, I wonder if any one of you asked where this figure came from? We weren't able to ask because we didn't see the report. It still hasn't been released to my knowledge. But did anyone wonder, as I did, that Peter Scotti, the appraiser, had done a similar appraisal and a similar project? He compared 5 or 6 18-hole golf courses in the same general region that were up for sale, and the average price of them was $3.5 million. So we get angry and we get frustrated. And then when we hear from someone of you who has called us nasty and mean and malicious and childish and said that the development of Metacomet doesn't bother him, well, again, we get angry and frustrated. Or when one of you said he was going to vote for the rezoning because, consider the alternative, it could be worse. And we think, well, what really could be a whole lot worse than liquor stores and drive-in fast food places? So we get angry and we get frustrated. And when we talk to you, you listen, but I don't think you really hear us. And we get angry and we get frustrated, and sometimes we get uncivil. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Renee Ignacio.
Hi,
Hi,
good
state-
evening.
State your name and address for the record, please.
My name's Renee Ignacio, and I live at 15 Madeline Drive. Excuse me, because it's a little tough. But I'm here to talk about the chicken ordinance that Councilwoman Souza wants to implement in the city. And I understand the need for emotional support animals as a person that suffers from high anxiety, depression, PTSD, and debilitating migraines. Yes, animals can help, but guidelines have to be set. As the chicken situation that's going on in my neighborhood, my neighbor got a coop, and she started to build this thing that is 10 feet wide by 20 feet long, and it's 15 feet away from my bedroom window. She now has 8 chickens in there. She has a letter from the city saying that she has violated zoning, and she continues to build it. She has put the chickens outside. You can smell it when it's hot and humidity. And I have a dog. I have a border collie that is now going nuts because he wants the chickens. She also has a dog kennel that is illegal. And there is 7 or 8 dogs sometimes in the yard, which drives my dog nuts. So I plead that you people please look into this chicken ordinance and understand where people are coming from. The other day, we have fox, we have coyotes, we have fisher cats, we have everything in the woods, and they are starting to come into our yards. The fox was under my window at 5 o'clock in the morning, screaming his head off, and if my dog goes through one of our doors, he is going to chase it down. Councilman Calhoun and Councilwoman Souza have been to the house to see it, as the mayor has. And the mayor said that he doesn't see or smell chickens, and he really doesn't see an issue with the situation. I worry for my dog. If the fox goes after him, contrary to what the animal control officer and the mayor has said, my dog could get hurt. He is my emotional support dog. He is mine. And if he gets hurt, are you people going to be liable for him? Are you going to pay the vet bills? If he gets destroyed, are you going to replace him? I plead every councilman to please come and look at the situation, see what's being built at my house. She is in violation of zoning and everything else and has the chickens outside, and there's nothing nobody is doing. I don't know why it's being allowed by the mayor, by the zoning officer, or by animal control. Animal control came up the other day, took pictures of it, saw the chickens, and didn't do anything. So I just plead that you people please come and take a look. My mom has sent everyone emails. She is on top of this, and I don't know what else to say. But I will be here for every meeting for chickens, along with my neighbors, because it is unfair to them. And if she is breaking zoning laws, violations, and everything else, she is laughing at all of you, the city, and her neighbors, saying, if I don't get what I want, I can sue the city, because that's exactly what she's doing. And that's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please. And final person.
Patrick DeMayo, I apologize if I'm wrong.
Mr. DeMayo? Domenico.
Domenico. My apologies.
All eyes.
State your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Patrick Domenico. I live at 30 Madeline Drive, Renee's neighbor. I was just concerned about this animals that she wants to have for his comforting. She has 8 chickens now. Which chickens does she take on the bus, plane, or railroad? I don't understand. Is she going to take all 8 chickens? Are we going to become a third world country again where they walk around going on the bus with their chickens? This is not the neighborhood to have 8 chickens. She had a rooster. She got rid of it because of the noise. But right now, she's in great danger as far as getting fined daily or monthly or whatever, however it works. But you've got to reconsider the fact that this is not a farming land. We're in the suburbs, but not really. But look around your own neighborhood. Consider maybe a chicken, 8, 10. Does it stop at 8? Does it stop at 10? You have to reconsider the fact where you live and where we live. It's not considered farmland. If you consider this, I'm going to get a goat. Do I have to go through this again next year? That's all I've got to say, guys. Reconsider it, please. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And that concludes public comment at this point in time, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so let's move right along. There's no appointments, and we'll go right from there.
We have council member communications continued. The first one is Vice President Rodrick's for a personal statement relative to negative character attacks.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I guess keeping with the low or negative vibe of the evening, I'm going to cut back a lot of what I had planned on saying, and I thought, Council President, I wasn't going to do it at all. And then I thought, no, I will, because my dad's name was invoked in all of this. I don't think there was a direct verbal assault, but it was brought up, and that's where I draw the line. And I talk about, of course, this goes to mostly the Metacomet issue, but there were other issues too, where some of us, including me, anyone wants to see the emails, I'll show you privately, where some of the offensive things that I was, or adjectives attributed to me, were corrupt, on the take, you're going to jail, I might go to jail someday. If you talk to my wife, I don't know, but deals with marshals, I never knew them, don't know them well now, and other things. And when one person who was a member of the KMG group made a comment and said, "Oh, Roderick is thinking he's," and I won't even get into it. And then he went on to say he's going to try to live up to, he's living in his father's shadow or something like that. And well, the first thing I did was, and I will say, and I did reach out, and I want to thank at least 2, maybe 3 of the leaders of KMG have always been supportive of civility. Candy Seal immediately had that comment taken off their page, and Heather was supportive, and Jane was supportive. And even though we had differed in our views on this, I appreciated that they did that. Not some of the others in the group, but as Ms. Seal said tonight, we all get hot under the collar. And I can take the hardballs in politics. Been involved in politics since I was a kid in high school, but I'm not going to have hardballs thrown at my dad, who passed away in 1973 when I was a teenager, and he had not even achieved the age of 54 at the time, and was known to legions of kids in this community and others for his support of youth groups. There's a ball field in the city with his name on it, not my name, his name. And I wasn't going to stand for any comment tossed that way. My family has worked hard to have a reputation in the city. You can diss any of my votes, but I would challenge to anybody to find corruptness, to find that I'm on the take, that I've taken money because of this. I've spent a lot of money maybe because of this, and that's fine. I accepted this job, but it as you can tell, it struck a nerve. And I have a son who's following in those footsteps and working with youth in the city, and a new grandson. And someday, when I'm long gone, when they read accounts of what occurred in this city, certainly, I hope they're going to be positive accounts and not read into any negative comments. So it has nothing to do with politics. I'm defending a family name tonight. And I understand politics probably as much as anybody in the city, but that's where you draw the line. And I would answer the gentleman, I don't see him here tonight. If he was, I would talk to him face to face. But I would say to him, as far as me living up to my dad's shoes, that is never going to happen, because he was a much greater man than I'll ever be. So he doesn't have to worry about that or whatever the heck he was getting at, because I am just a shadow of what my dad has contributed to this community. And my son will be more than I've ever done for this community. So I thank those members of the leadership of KMG who pulled the comments off. And I hope that you continue to tell your members that, throw hardballs, but don't get into personal attacks. And I know you've said that, and I know you can't control it, just like we all can't control any of us. So I understand that. But I would close by saying I'll do it again if someone else comes after a family member or says that I'm corrupt or I've taken money or that I've done something that's going to put me in jail. Yes, we've listened to what you have said, people that disagreed with the vote. We've also listened to others. There are other opinions in the city, and my vote was not devoid of other opinions. There were others who had a voice. They weren't loud about it. They didn't wear the shirts, which is a great idea. They didn't do it that way, but I certainly heard from other people. And everyone up here really put in an honest effort. Nobody here made a motion to go for eminent domain. This wasn't just a three-person thing. There was a lot of discussion back and forth. But in any event, 1973 was a long time ago, but you don't forget your parents, and you don't forget what people have done. And case closed.
Can I add something to that? First of all, thank you for that, Councilman Rodrick. The past few months has been challenging for everyone. Our council members of the public. I keep saying the same thing over and over again. As good as our last decision, our last comment, our last anything. Everything else before that, you can invent the cure for cancer. They'll be forgotten and wiped away. We basically get 25 cents an hour if you break it down at the amount of hours that we put in and dedicate ourselves to doing council work. It's not an easy task. I can speak of that firsthand, being in it for 2.5 years now. But one thing I can say with the members that council members, my colleagues, that I know that whichever way they voted or vote on certain items, it's that their belief that, you know, they did their homework and that was the right decision at that point in time for whatever that discussion or topic is. And I respect everyone's opinion and vote ultimately. And that's the difference between this council and previous councils, is that we vote and we move on to the next topic. So I full-heartedly agree with you that, you know, we're the public, we're in a public limelight, come after us if you have to, but family and, you know, especially deceased ones, that's should not be acceptable by anyone. So thank you for that.
You know, I was going to bite my tongue, but I can't at this point in time. I would just say that, welcome to my world, Councilman. I've been going through this for a whole year. And, you know, I'm a big boy. I can handle it. At least I think I can. And I know sometimes I get a little rough under the feathers, you know, just a little. But if you're going to call me out, call me out. Make sure you have your facts. Make sure you say the right thing. Same thing, you know, I was on the take. I got money. I got a new car. All these things came up about me over the last year or so. And of course, none of it is true. And I've always asked if any of it is true, please prove it. No one has since then. But it's unfortunate that it got to that point. And, you know, I showed one side of me that I guess that, you know, after a certain point in time when people continue to say one thing after another and just constantly lie, you got to retaliate. You know, at no point in time when I took an oath of office here and raised my right hand, that I said that I'm going to be anybody's punching bag. I could take it. You know, you come after me, and a lot of times I don't say anything. Most of the times I don't say anything. You don't hear me too frequently on social media. But, you know, after a year of this badgering and on the take, and we're going to come in front of your house, and we're going to protest in front of your house, and we're going to send videos of you to your job, it's getting a little out of hand. So, you know, the way I feel about it is that, you know, you could say what you want, but as you continue to say what you want, just be prepared that one day that I come back after you, because I'm going to come back after you strong as well. I'm not going to be anybody's punching bag. I can let you all know that right now. Those days are done. But we can have civil conversations as well, and you could talk to me and ask me why I came to the decisions that I came to. But nobody wanted to talk to me about it. They figure, well, let's go after him instead. We'll change his mind. Well, you figured that out, that my mind wasn't going to be changed. But I think going forward that we could come to some compromise and we could talk civilized, whether you like me or not. I'm going to be here for the next year and a half. I'm not going anywhere. And I think, you know, we can have more of a civilized conversation going forward. I could put all that behind me. But going forward, let's have more of a civil conversation. And I'll be more than willing to sit down and talk to anybody if they choose to talk to me or want to talk to me or have a cup of coffee with me and get into my head and think and have the discussion with me as to why, you know, the thought process that I was going through during that whole year. But again, no one chooses to do that. They just decide to toss stones at me and cast me and, you know, call me all kind of liars and things of that nature. And it's sad in a way because, you know, we all have families here. We all have kids. And when some of the kids read that and their friends read that and, you know, but they know who I am. But that's the sad part about it. It's just constant lies for 12 months that went on for. And, but I'm willing to forgive and forget and move on. And at this point in time, I think that's all we can do. So thank you for putting that on the docket. You can have it, I guess, if you can find it. Okay, Deputy Clerk, maybe move on to the next item, please.
Item B is traffic issues on Promenade Street in Riverside for discussion from Vice President Rogers.
Yes. It's an issue Councilman Morado and I have been working on for a while of not finding an easy resolution. Is Mr. Amarantis here? Okay, in a second, I'll ask you to come forward. I'm going to ask him to speak a little bit. In a nutshell, this is a street in Riverside that I believe is partially in Barrington, and some of it is here. And there are, as Mr. Amarantes will tell us, that he's been dealing with speeding and issues for 30 years and problems. But obviously, we can't tell Barrington what to do. So I won't get into all the details. We've been getting long enough here tonight. I did ask our Director of DPW, Dan, I don't know if you had time. I got to you late, but I don't know if you had a chance to look at that. But maybe before you address it, we could allow Mr. Amarantes, if you could do it briefly and give us a little history and what you're asking us to do. I think you're asking us to make it a no-through street or some other options, but is it okay if he comes forward for?
Yeah.
And we do have 3 minutes or less to speak, so. And then I'd ask DPW Director to maybe answer what you.
Thank you. I'm Anthony Amarantes, 109 Promenade Street in Riverside. Thank you for taking my phone calls. Both of you, I appreciate it. So just quickly, I've been a resident down there for 30 years. And a while ago, I went before the Barrington Town Council, East Providence Town Council, asked to have some stop signs put up, safety concerns. Both of you did the stop signs put up. This is the first through street that runs from Washington to Metropolitan Park Drive. First through street. So there's a lot of avenues that they don't have to use this, which, I wrote down. The second through street is on Haynes Park Drive. But the problem with that through street, there's 3 speed bumps, there's 2 ball fields, and there's a dog park. It's not in the neighborhood. They don't use that. They come down our road. We've had a dog get hit. I had a kid break his leg. I had an older lady get bumped by a car in the last 30 years. And so what they do is they hit Washington. They fly down to the first stop sign, which is Richmond Street, which that goes right to Willard Avenue.
Mhm.
And then what they do is they come down the hill to Rogers, where the stop sign is. They blow right through that. And they speed up to get to Metropolitan. So most of the blinkers, they go this way straight to Promenade, and the other ones, they go to their little routes to get home. And there's roads designed for that. There's outlets designed for that, So I basically, in a nutshell, I just don't understand why we can't have some type, and what I'm asking the council to do is, at the corner of Promenade Street and Rogers, is put a do not enter sign. And what that's going to do is going to still allow the people from Washington to come down to Richmond and Rogers to get to Barrington. It's not going to affect that. What's it's going to affect is going to stop the people from keep flying down this road to get to Metropolitan Drive to do their outlets. There's plenty of other roads to do that. Plenty other roads to do that. So my question, is how many more people are going to get hurt? Brian and Amanda, they just moved across the street. They got a little kid. Every time that little kid goes towards the driveway, they're running after that kid to stop him. And I know that you was going to have the, DPW gentleman come down. I said, if he does, have him spend some time down there.
And I went there too, and it's narrow, kind of narrow, the street when cars are parking.
That's
so
correct.
it is difficult, but I don't know, Dan, can you add anything to this?
I've said at that intersection a couple of times. It is a cut through from Barrington.
It's been 30 years like that.
And I've been asking our last Director Beverages if there's any possible way of at least starting with, those temporary speed bumps at that intersection to at least get them to stop at that stop sign.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I have not had a chance to get down there and take a look at
Yeah,
that.
and I apologize, I only reached you.
No
the other
problem at
way.
all. I did reach out to the police. I wanted to try to get an understanding if a speed study has been done there.
I believe it has. They've done one of those poll last year.
Okay. So, I mean, I'd like to see the result of that and get an idea of.
The temporary speed bump, has the city purchased any yet?
We have not.
Now, would that be on our street? The
I
speed
mean,
bump?
90% of the roadway is, I believe, Barrington.
Right,
So
so we couldn't put it without their.
The cutoff
Rogers.
is Rogers.
Yeah, Rogers and Promenade is
That's
ours.
the cutoff right there. So what I'm asking for is a sign to be put on East Providence a do not enter, and it's going to, and I'll leave you this here, it's going to still give them all the outlets, but it's not going to give them the right, they have no accountability to keep on going down there and flying.
Well, Director, would you have time for our next council meeting to come back and maybe some thoughts or recommendations?
Yeah, like I said, I reached out to the police. I want to
Okay.
try to get some more information. I'd be happy to do so. And I'd be happy to meet with you.
I appreciate
on site.
May I interject briefly? Recall we had a similar discussion about Mountain Avenue a couple of months ago. We put in the no-through, and I don't know, sir, if you're familiar with Mountain Avenue running
not,
from
no.
Veterans Memorial Parkway to Pawtucket Avenue, just short of Bradley Hospital when you're coming toward Riverside. And they have a very similar problem. People cut through there all the time, cut through at high speed. We had a speed study prior to putting the sign up. Sergeant Andrews went back and has done a second study after the signs have been up. And the data really isn't all that different. And one of the things that we're running into when police have stopped people and asked them why they're ignoring the signs is they're just following their GPS. They've got their GPS. I'm not kidding. They've got their GPS configured to avoid stop signs, stoplights.
Yeah.
And
they're going through neighborhoods so they don't.
It is true. I mean, if you put it in your GPS, it does send you down. I've actually sent an email to DOT to try to address that and ideally force the traffic onto Pawtucket Avenue. So that may be a solution. I mean, it's something that we can
It's a great idea.
certainly send to DOT, and they have the ability to do whatever they do on their computers. And
Yeah.
The point I'm making is we're going to be chasing this thing forever, right? I mean, until people literally start realizing that they have to obey speed laws and drive like human beings instead of like maniacs. This is something we're going to be chasing and trying to find an enforcement
Yeah,
or
but
legal
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
lawmaking.
But if there's no
things when-
accountability, then you're going to keep chasing it. You're right. There's no accountability whatsoever. That's 30 years of being down there. 9 to 10 o'clock at night, forget about it. It's open. It's
Oh,
open.
I
Open
concur.
freeway.
I totally concur, right? I totally concur that it's an accountability issue, right? Problem is enforcement. You've only got so many cops spread out across the state, the city that have to, look at speed everywhere. People, as a rule, aren't crazy about the idea of speed cameras, which we're probably getting anyway, because we're at the point where enough people just blow off the laws that people's lives are in danger. There's not too many options left to us other than, Big Brother type options. So we're going to keep chasing down the Mountain Avenue thing. I'm going to meet with that group again this week and we'll talk about it. But what Mr. Amarantes is talking about, people are experiencing everywhere across the city.
But it's my road. And for
It
30
is.
If for 30 years, and there's no Big Brother down there except for me. And I haven't asked the East Providence Police Department or the Barron Police Department to use their resources to stay down there.
And I'm not saying not to put up the signs.
Right.
I'm just saying that might not be sufficient and we might have to do additional things at the same time.
But until you try it, you don't know.
I'm for that.
Thank
So-
you for your time.
Just to add on that, and thank you, sir, we could essentially as a council put together a resolution seeking the Barrington City Council or Town Council to maybe put or consider putting a no-through sign on their end, again, to try to help with some of that area too. They could reject it, but at least, we're doing our due diligence and asking for some assistance on their end to help our residents who are being affected by it.
It can't hurt.
I've only known about this for I don't know, a few
5
days now.
minutes.
So I'd like the opportunity to talk to Alan Corby over in Barrington and try to figure out a solution for that roadway.
Wasn't he an East Providence resident, town manager?
Town engineer at one point, our city engineer.
Robert DeAngelis, he lived on that same street.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming in. We'll
Thank
do
you
what
for
we
your
can.
time.
Okay.
I'll reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman, for putting that on as well.
Thank you. It's warm.
Okay, next item, please. Kind of lost my,
We're under council members' communication.
okay.
Item D, it's the budget timeline for 2021 to 2022 with a possible vote on dates by Councilmember Morano.
So with that new ordinance that we passed last year, and we all got the timeline at the last council meeting, I just have a question for our Assistant Solicitor. On that August 2nd timeline, the Financial Review Committee annual presentation, what does that look like for us at this point, since we have not received that? And what does that mean?
I don't know that there's a specific enforcement provision within the ordinance off the top of my head. To the extent that the Financial Review Committee still wants to come forward to give a presentation, they'd be able to. I believe this is the first year we've had that requirement. But the rest of the dates there's a chunk of the dates that are in front of you that are driven solely by the charter. And then there are some dates that the ordinance extended the charter dates to really deal with the fact that we now have to calculate veto time into all of those deadlines as a result of the mayoral form of government, which is new. So some of the dates in the ordinance are only in the ordinance. And then some of the dates that you have in front of you as specific deadlines are driven by the charter. The charter, violations of the charter are much more significant than a violation of an ordinance.
So the 2 dates that we should, and the purpose of this is trying to get some workshop dates in, and hopefully, so we're not at crunch time, 11th hour, trying to pass a budget. So the 2 dates that we need to really be concerned with and try to schedule in between, the 23rd, the mayor must submit budget message to the council. And then the 17th is the council must take final action on the budget. So we have up to,
That's on October.
I'm sorry, October 17th, correct. So August 23rd, budget. October 17th is absolute, vote. When you calculate, the veto days and going backwards from that 31st of October and the fiscal year. So what I'm asking tonight is if we could come together and at least tentatively or whatever, put down some dates that we could meet, and at least we know going forward that, we have these workshops that we can get, going on this budget.
So we have to have the budget by the 23rd, right?
Correct.
With that being said, would one day next week?
That's good.
Provided that we have the budget.
I'm open, so it's trying to, if we can get some dates down.
So that's Monday is the 23rd.
Right, but we want to give.
No, but I'm saying that's when you're saying
So the week of.
week of.
23rd.
We don't have any other
No,
meetings
go to
this
week.
month either.
Oh,
So-
And it has, what about advertising and legal notice?
The
Timeline?
advertising and legal notice is even more complicated than calculating the dates backwards. So if we do have dates that are convenient for the council, I can calculate all the advertising requirements from that information and then communicate it to the clerk's office so that we have appropriate advertisement. The sooner we do organize that, we can build in a little bit of breathing room. So let's say we have a hearing set for a Monday, we don't finish, we can continue it to the Tuesday, and then we can continue it to the Wednesday, and we can do that live. We can do that to a date certain.
Can I raise one point? The school committee has not yet approved the school budget. So a school budget, it's really not going to do us much good to be looking at the city budget, because the city budget is going to get the school budget and going to have to adjust. I think the school committee is going to approve their budget at their next meeting, I think. And I am not sure when that next meeting is. But I really think that needs to be done and submitted to the city with enough time to digest it before we start taking our cuts at the city budget.
So what are we looking to? I'm sorry.
Could we just, because of the dates and the times, so we're going to have to set days for hearings and times for hearings, but I think we should also have workshops that are outside of those hearings. I think that's what the council
Correct.
is referring to. So though we school committee's budget, we can still look at the city sides and not necessarily even make changes to anything, but look at it and have a discussion about it and listen, and then have another meeting, you know what I mean? So that because it's a lot, right? And so for me, I need time to look through everything, all the departments, probably more so than maybe some other council members. But I need workshop instead of just hearing days where it's, you know, crunch time between each department, whether you are making changes, not making changes, asking questions. I need those workshops in between to really go through the budget.
I get it. I just don't personally see the point in having a workshop where the numbers aren't finalized.
So why don't we start looking at the dates into September instead of August? And that way, give the school committee a little bit more time, but also, as Councilwoman Souza said, we can work in those workshops on the city side to at least get some of those out of the way.
Do
the school
workshops have to be advertised the same as a hearing?
No, they're subject to the Open Meetings Act, but they're not subject to the same public
Time.
notices for hearings on the actual vote on the agenda.
But we give a 48-hour notice.
We
We
give
have to
a
give
minimum
notice.
48-hour
Yes.
notice, not including weekends and holidays. And then all of those workshops will lead up to final votes, which require notice in newspapers.
Public hearing.
So those public hearings. And I know everyone on the council knows this, but for the benefit of the public, getting in a newspaper is also really difficult. They have very specific time windows that you need to put your advertisement through in order to get it on a run by date, which is how you calculate how far out from. It's just super fun.
What stops us from saying we're going to meet every Tuesday in September and October right now, right? And if the information is there, great, we proceed. If it's not, we come in, we're out of here in 5 minutes.
Does a school committee meet on Tuesdays?
The school committee meets on the second and fourth Tuesdays generally. We're on the first and third. We're supposed to be the first, they're supposed to be the second, but we both meet twice a month.
So where would we meet if they're having their meeting? Is there another location on those off Tuesdays that the school committee has, their meetings?
I don't think it has to be a Tuesday, right? Could be.
No, it
could be
doesn't
any
have
day.
to be a
It'd have
Tuesday.
to
I just
be-
threw a
could be
Tuesday
just
out
about-
because we
yeah.
typically keep Tuesdays free, but
I like that. Why don't we do, since we have our meetings the first and last Tuesday of every month, in between we do the Wednesdays.
we do first and third.
So in between we do the Wednesdays so that we don't have any scheduling issues of, the council chambers.
I don't have, if a particular one of us
It's
is at
five.
work or can't make it, then
Right.
so be it.
Yeah,
If it's
may not all be
It's a
here.
workshop.
workshops and there's no
five.
votes, then
Right.
There are 5 Wednesdays in September. Is the first, is that a holiday weekend?
So the first Tuesday in September is the 7th. I believe we have a council meeting on that Tuesday. I believe that's scheduled. So technically, we can start one
Can we do it
department
on
item.
the Wednesday? I mean, on the 9th, the Thursday that week for a workshop? Well, Tuesday, the 7th is our council meeting, so we're going to have ordinances that are on this docket be put onto the next docket.
We
So I
can
think
do
We
the-
want to,
About the Wednesday, the 8th.
yeah, we can do the Wednesday.
Yeah, 8th is okay.
Is everyone okay with the 8th being the first workshop?
Yeah, I'm good.
I think this time of year too, it should behoove all of us as council members to try to keep the agendas light, other than things that absolutely have to be discussed and voted on, so that we can also use the council meetings too. But if we're here, some of our agendas, go on and on and on, and it's budget time, so let's key in on that, along with other critical things.
So do we want to start the workshop at 6:30, 6 o'clock?
Either of that, those times are fine.
6
with me.
6:30 is better for me.
Okay.
6:30
in
then?
general.
6:30.
That's-
Yeah.
How about got a couple more dates, and how about the 22nd, which is another Wednesday?
Sure.
What
Council
happened to the
members,
15th? I thought we were going to do.
you want to do 15th also?
Well, I mean, just put them in.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
think. Just
Put
have
them in,
all-
and if we don't need
just
it,
Put them all in.
We'll just get done quicker, that's all.
yeah. And you can always cancel or leave, but you
15th,
can't
22nd,
add.
29th.
Correct. And then Dylan, you said that we need some public hearing dates also, correct?
The public hearing dates will be based off of, I know you have the series of dates in front of you based, the memo we pulled up based on the charter and the ordinance. I'll have to work back from those dates to identify when the public hearings are to sort out the advertisements. I think setting the workshops is an excellent start.
Okay.
And if you get through the material you want to get through a couple weeks early, then we can schedule the public hearings earlier and you can have a little bit of
All right.
flexibility there.
So hold off on the public hearing dates.
Yes, I think that makes sense.
I think it's a good start to have these at least,
So the 8th, the 15th, and the 22nd?
correct.
Yep. Start off with those.
Thank you, council.
Okay. Next item, please.
Update on the new East Providence High School discussion only from Councilman Cahoon.
We'll do this quickly. The important point is that school will open on time at the high school. Kids going to the high school will go to the high school on schedule. The date of substantial completion for the building is the 30th of August. What we're looking at is pretty much a hard turnover, which we already knew. So the building company turns the building over to the school department, and all of the employees and kids are getting into that school effectively at the same time, right? So that's going to take a little bit of learning curve. This is not the old building. This is essentially a Ferrari, right? And they're going to have to learn how to drive a Ferrari over the first couple of days. There are another couple of important points that I want the public to know. Of course, as I just mentioned, building is on schedule. The building remains under budget. There is a lot more work that needs to be done on the grounds. I think everybody knows the schedule is building is done this year, grounds are complete about a year later, once the demolition is complete and all of the fields are installed. So a large portion of that plot is going to remain an active construction site, which is going to require safety protocols. The school department has the protocols to get the kids in and out, dropped in and off, buses, et cetera. But we need the public to recognize that it's an active construction site. We don't need people, and I say this because it's happened, we don't need people waltzing right up to where a gigantic truck is taking down large pieces of concrete and asserting that they're either employees of the school department or taxpayers and accordingly have the right to be there and observe what's going on. That is not helpful. Also, we need people to pay attention and recognize that you're on an active construction site. So please, by all means, bring your kids in, get them out, get off the campus as soon as possible. One added piece of information is the football field and stadium behind the building is essentially complete. And the plans are that that will be utilized for the football season this fall. So that's going to be another consideration for folks. The first time you go to a Townie football game, you're going to have to pay very close attention on how to get in and get out of there and just be very careful. We talked about speeding. No speeding. Be real low speed. I want to bring something up, Council President Berto, because I know that this is something that you've been focused on throughout. The WMBE or MWBE participation at this point of the project is at about 13%, which exceeds the state's goal of 10% and totals just short of $26 million in participation as far as value goes. And that is a phenomenal achievement. So everything is good. This is all good news. Let's be patient through the first month of the year and realize that we're all figuring out together. Ultimately, this is going to be a transformational thing for the city of East Providence.
And Councilman, the school is opening on time.
School is opening on time. Okay. Kids are going to school on time. This is a fully functional Death Star.
Now, I just have a question, because I know seniors, they usually do a parking, do they have a parking for students in addition to faculty?
So it's a good question. I'm not sure exactly how the parking for students is going to work out. Ultimately, yes, there's going to be loads of parking for everybody. I do not know how it's going to play out those first couple of weeks.
Are they still talking about that on the school committee side or coming up with?
They didn't
feedback?
talk about it at the last meeting, and we haven't discussed it at the building committee, but it's a fair question that I'll raise and I'll bring back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman. We're going to proceed now. Councilman Rodrick, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I wanted
You
to
wanna-
suggest, discuss with Council President before the meeting. I believe we have a couple of people who are going to speak on the ordinances on page 9. And so rather than have them stay later, I'd like to suggest, if there's no objection, that the mixed-use hub overlay, the first item on page 9, and the second item, zoning, that we could hear those hopefully brief presentations by those staff who were here, and then we could continue back with the, do we need a motion, or is?
Anyone, I don't think we need a motion. Do we need a motion? I just.
If
I
we have
mean, at the-
unanimous
at the
consent.
Consent of everybody. If anyone's an objection of it, just, okay, so then we can.
I don't either. I just wanted to add in that last passage, the second passages for that public hearing also at the same time,
Mhm.
since the public's still
Sure.
We'll get that on as well.
to move that up. So in case
Yep.
any resident has anything to add to public comment,
Yeah, makes sense.
public hearing. Thank you.
All right, Councilman?
So I don't know if, Madam Deputy Clerk, if you could
So we're on,
call up those first two items on top of page 9, for those following along in the agendas on page 9, top 2 items.
Ordinances for first passage. It's an ordinance in amendment of Chapter 19 of the revised ordinances of East Providence, Rhode Island, as amended, entitled zoning, section 19-322. In summary, this is an ordinance. It addresses the zoning amendment for the mixed-use hub overlay district.
Councilman Rodrick?
And I think that Director Fazioli, if my recollection is correct, this is similar to what we have previously passed for another area. And at the time, we decided to just not pile it all on that night and move it. So it's something we have discussed.
Correct, yes. This is the same zoning that would be allowed on Taunton Avenue, Waterman Avenue, and parts of Warren Avenue, allowing for different various, more flexible uses of the buildings there.
And moving it now to Riverside.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, it's from Washington Street down to Lou Ray Street as well. But I think Councilman Cahoon was interested in maybe modifying the amendment to include some other parcels as
Yes.
well that
Okay.
we've included in the original ordinance.
That are not included in this passage,
That's
yeah.
correct.
He's returning from his coffee break.
Right, yeah. But I was just mentioning, Councilman Cahoon, that this is the overlay ordinance for Riverside Square, but there might be some interest in adding some other additional parcels than what's included in the ordinance tonight.
I do have such an interest in one particular parcel.
Please.
Oh, and I believe that's parcel number 24 on our map, correct?
Yeah, actually, that's just the physical street address. The actual parcel map lot number is 31286. And Patrick, is that the map lot parcel? Is that how that goes?
Yeah, that's correct. It's map 3112, block 8, parcel 6.
Yeah, which is the Stevie D's.
For those of you.
It's on
right, so-
Monroe Avenue.
Yeah, so, if the overlay district runs with those buildings that just have frontage, technical frontage on Bullocks Point Avenue, I mean, it seems kind of logical to me that Stevie D's is effectively there. So it just makes sense to include them as well.
That's all.
Okay.
Is this just the initial referral to planning? Well, planning board already approved, made an advisory opinion. It should be included in the council materials where they made an advisory opinion to approve this zoning change. Is it favorable including this lot? This lot was not included in the original, in the transmission from the planning board, but I think the public hearing, the way we advertised it, Patrick, would allowed for amendments to be made at the hearing tonight. Okay. Okay, so we advertised potential changes, and it's for an overlay district, not a specific list of parcels originally. So it's the description of adjacent to Bullocks Point is what the ad was? Right, yeah. Okay, we described the boundaries on the Washington running southerly to Lou Ray in that sort of description, but we didn't, I don't know if we identified specific parcels, but more of a boundary line of the zoning. I'm just trying to confirm that any member of the public that saw that understood that this parcel might be included. And it sounds like it's pretty clear that there was a chance that if you were this close to Bullocks Point Ave in that area, that you were on reasonable notice that this parcel may be included. Yeah, and we advertised that zoning change 3 times, in the East Providence Post.
And Luray goes right before Lee's Restaurant,
Yes.
basically. That's the street. Mr. Slitzer, is this public hearing?
It
per
is.
se?
It is.
It is, okay.
So have we moved the ordinance up for?
We moved it up,
discussion
so
now?
yes,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
all right, So.
Yeah.
My apologies.
So at the pleasure of the council, anyone have any questions? If not, I'll open it up to the public. This is a public hearing for those of you in the audience wishing to speak for or against this ordinance. Please approach the podium. I'll announce it one more time, then I'll close. Please approach the podium.
My name is Roy Miller, 64 Channing Avenue, Riverside. I just wanted to, I spoke last time, we saw this at the other overlays. I think that, again, this is a really important part of the redevelopment and revitalization of a lot of buildings that are functionally obsolete in Riverside Square. I'm very supportive of Stevie D's being included in there. It's plainly obvious. It's part of the infrastructure of the square. And I know that I think one of the, I look forward to further conversation. And there's a study that's coming up, Roger Williams University, on this, that I think is going to add a lot of value to this overlay district. I also want to add that all overlay districts, this is something I learned recently, can qualify us potentially for that entire district for federal funding and relief funds that would not be available to individual property owners. But as an overlay district, we can apply for them. And I'm sure someone from the planning department could jump in there. So it opens up a number of different avenues to, again, bring funds and bring new ideas to the Riverside Square that are desperately needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this ordinance? Please approach the podium. If not, public comment is now closed. I'm going to leave this at the pleasure of the council for.
So, Council President, I'd like to make a motion to amend the ordinance to include in Section 4 in the Riverside Square Overlay District, map 312, parcel 6. Is that right?
Block A.
Block A.
8.
8, thank you. To the ordinance.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by the councilwoman to amend the ordinance as spoken. Would anyone like to second that motion?
I will second.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next ordinance, please.
No,
Wait,
now I'd like
no.
to make a motion
Oh.
to pass the ordinance as amended, ordinance for the overlay mixed-use district in the city.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Councilman Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next ordinance, please.
An ordinance and amendment of Chapter 19 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Zoning, Section 19-95. This is a zoning change of parcels 1, 2, and 11 as shown in the attached Exhibit A, presently located in an R3 district, are hereby changed to an R4 district. Councilman Cahoon.
So effectively, what this change allows for is not just the development of single-family houses, but also for the development of two-family houses. The thinking here is, and I believe we all have the map in our packets, the thinking here is you would see 8 single-family plots, if you will. You would see 3 two-family plots, with the two-family plots being deed restricted as affordable housing units. Affordable housing means 80% of they're affordable to 80% of the median income. It does not mean that they are quote unquote Section 8 housing. I believe that this type of development is consistent with the structure of the neighborhood. There are 2 and multifamily units dispersed throughout that area of Riverside. It allows us to not only advance our goals to meet the state goal of 10% affordable housing within the city, but it also allows for, some more accessible housing to, to folks in the city where, we all know that this is a problem, especially given the current market. Housing prices are out of control. Who knows how long that's going to last? Building costs are through the roof. So it makes sense to, I think, in any development that we're going to do or that we're going to approve, to make sure that a reasonable portion of that is set aside, if you will, so folks have a little bit better access to it. So that's basically my spiel on that zoning change. I don't know, Mr. Fazioli, if you have anything additional to add.
I have a question on that. Has that property been sold yet on
No.
those lots?
Nothing's been sold, no. That has to come to the council when the properties are actually sold, so nothing's been sold. Last month, the planning board established a subdivision which created the lots and included their recommendation that 3 of the lots be duplex, allow for duplexes, 10,000 square foot lots, but nothing's been sold.
Is it on the market?
No, not
currently?
yet.
Okay.
No, we want to go through all of this process before we obviously do all of that. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
And I think the minimum for a 2-family lot is what, 8725 square feet or something
Yeah,
like
we're doing
that.
10,000 square feet.
And these are 10,000
They're being
square foot.
proposed for. And just to follow up on Councilman Cahoon's, statement, back in 2014, the median sales price for a house in East Providence was $170,000. At the end of 2020, it was already up to $270,000. And through the first half of 2021, it's well north of $300,000. So the escalation of housing prices continues. Obviously, incomes are not keeping pace with that. So the gap of who can afford a house gets bigger and bigger every year. Based on a report by Housing Works Rhode Island, for someone to afford a median sales home price in 2019 in East Providence, which was $245,000, they needed to have a household income of $73,000. The city's median household income is $57,000. So we're already, behind the 8 ball, with people are already well behind the ability to afford a house, even not including the continuing advancement in prices. So I think it's something that we ask developers to consider affordable housing when they put in a development. In this case, the city is a developer here. We are the ones putting in the master plan and the subdivision. I think it's only right that we also take on that responsibility to provide affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Fazioli. Any other questions from the council? This is a public hearing. With that being said, again, this is a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this ordinance, please approach the podium. No one approaching the podium. Public comment is now closed. I'll leave it at the pleasure of the council for a motion and a vote.
Mr. President, I move to approve an ordinance, an amendment of Chapter 19 of the revised ordinance of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island 1998, as amended, entitled Zoning, Section 1995.
So we do have a motion on the floor by Councilman Cahoon. Would anyone like to second that motion? Seconded by Councilman Morado. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote on this, please?
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Morado.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Councilwoman, you want to proceed with the
Public hearing.
public hearing?
ordinance.
Mhm.
So that's on page 10.
We're just kind of jumping around a little bit. We have public here, and we want to not have them spend the rest of the evening with us, so.
Madam Deputy Clerk, if you wouldn't mind reading.
Sure. Ordinance is for second passage and public hearing. An ordinance in amendment of Chapter 18 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Vehicles and Traffic, Section 18-12 and 18-76, This is changes to certain traffic patterns and certain traffic signage to require city council consent from Councilwoman Souza.
Thank you. So this is, again, something that we've discussed at length on numerous council meetings regarding traffic pattern changes, whether the temporary signage and changes cannot be done without prior council approval. It just is more specific than the language that we currently had in the city. So open up to public comment or any other council.
At the pleasure of the council, anybody have any questions? This is a public hearing, so to speak for or against this ordinance, please approach the podium. No one's approaching the podium, so therefore, public hearing is now closed at this point in time. Councilwoman,
Motion to approve?
Second.
Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Okay.
We're on to adjournment. I'm just kidding.
Not so fast.
My favorite part.
All right, let's
Mr.
get back
President,
online. Yes,
Just for the benefit of the public, I did want to note that that was the last remaining public hearing we had on the docket for this evening. So to the extent that someone is seeking to participate in a public hearing, there are none left. Just, there's a few folks in the audience. I just wanted to make sure they knew that. That's all.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. All right, where did we leave off now?
To page 6, I think. Resolutions.
There we are. Resolutions.
You want to go to resolution?
Yes, please. On page 7, it looks like we're starting on page 6, and which is D, and we're on resolutions.
Okay, so for resolutions, we have a resolution of the East Providence City Council regarding noise pollution along the East Providence waterfront, sponsored by Councilman Cahoon, Council President Brito, Council Vice President Rodrick, and Councilwoman Souza.
Someone take the lead on this, please.
Sure, I'll start. I think we probably all are in favor of sponsoring this, and Councilman Cahoon had started the ball rolling by contacting the Providence City Council. Quickly, the Providence City Council, and they have many members, 15, I believe, they unanimously approved the resolution. And I spoke with Councilman Cahoon, and I got in touch with Councilman John Gonzalez of Providence, who was very supportive and was asking us to join with them. And we certainly want to be in a position of working with Providence to solve this problem. And we brought it up initially. So I won't get into a lot of the discussion. I think the community is familiar with the issue. Loud noise emanating from city of Providence coming across the waterfront and affecting a good amount of East Providence. They have some concerns too in Providence with the concerts that we have on the waterfront. So we want to work together. Councilman Gonzalez mentioned that there was one show recently at Bold Point, which involved some kind of a DJ type service, and there were actually some, lack of a better way of describing it, obscenities that were coming out at this show, and they were radiating across the water to Providence. Their park there, where they had a family day, and people could hear that. It was resolved quickly. A call was made to the Bold Point people, and they went right to the stage and told them, knock that off. So that might be something for future conversation for us, looking at the types of shows that are there, although 99% have been great. So I think the resolution will explain it best, and because it's important, I think I'll read through it quickly. And I had added an item or two that Providence didn't have, and Councilman Gonzalez was okay with that. Councilman Cahoon agreed, and Councilwoman Souza, and I'm sure I'll explain it when I get to that. But this is a resolution, which would be a joint resolution of the East Providence City Council in Providence regarding noise pollution along the East Providence waterfront. Whereas the East Providence City Council hereby endorses a collaborative joint city commission consisting of East Providence and Providence, elected officials, public safety officials, and constituents to strengthen communication and determine a cohesive and consistent plan of action to mitigate and address noise traveling across the river. Whereas with the easing of COVID restrictions, the start of, and we've more than started, summer, fall, the hopeful return to a sense of normality, there's been a recent increase in activity along the waterfront, and this has been generating the complaints and the ongoing noise pollution that we're all hearing. Whereas although the summer season calls for enjoyment and fun, we encourage everyone to be mindful of the other members of the community and avoid loud, unnecessary, excessive, and offensive noise, as noise pollution can have direct adverse impacts on public health and diminishes the quality of life for surrounding residents. Whereas the East Providence City Council shares the concerns of the members of the Providence City Council regarding quality of life issues and is committed to working with our counterparts to ensure that everyone in both cities is able to enjoy the outdoors without the intrusion of excessive and offensive noise pollution. Be it further resolved, and this is a part that I had suggested and most parties agree, because this was my primary concern, I think all of ours. Be it further resolved that the primary concern from the East Providence City Council is the frequency and loudness of music which emanates from private individuals along the Providence waterfront, causing excessive noise pollution to travel across the water to East Providence. So I want to be able to address those private individuals who are parking in cars till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, blasting boom boxes across the water. Not so much the family days at India Point Park. You know, there might be a little noise on an afternoon from that, but it's over at a certain time. So they agreed to that. Be it further resolved that there is a central web link and location for constituents both on East Providence and Providence's websites, where dates, times, concerts, events at Bull Point and India Point Park are proactively listed so residents can anticipate, monitor, track the noise. So basically, it's getting the schedules out on both cities' websites and advertising. I think we're doing that a lot now, and our Bull Point has a website with everyone knows who's coming. You buy tickets ahead of time, but it puts it in the resolution. Be it further resolved that the city council hereby requests that the mayor's administration of each city provide on its website a non-emergency number that constituents call to report noise complaints. So a number that you can call. I think we've been calling the police department, whoever, so that can easily be put on the websites. And we added so that we don't have another ordinance or study that collects dust on a shelf, that be it further resolved that within 14 days of passage of this resolution, the respective city council presidents or their designees, so you could designate someone if your schedule doesn't permit, to meet either virtually or in person to discuss the immediate formation of this joint commission. It's pretty basic. So the two council presidents or their designees, they can pick anyone they want to sit down and say, okay, let's get a committee going and let's start talking about this. And finally, be it further resolved that upon passage, copies of this resolution be sent to the Honorable Mayor of East Providence, the members of the East Providence City Council, the Chief of the East Providence Police Department, and a Bull Point representative from Live Nation, and the Rhode Island Waterfront Enterprises General Manager, and also the Providence. I won't read them all. The Providence Mayor, Police Chief, et cetera, and any other appropriate person or agency the city council may seek to invite. So if someone on the council had a constituent that was really in tune with this issue, you could put that person on the commission as well. And that would be adopted tonight. I want to thank Councilman Cahoon for getting that first email blast out to Providence, and it did generate a response. Took a while. For a while, they didn't get to us, but Councilman Gonzalez came through, and 15 of them voted this same ordinance. So I think we should join in as well. So that's basically how it reads.
And Mr. Rodericks, if I may, and Mr. President, if I may, Councilman Gonzalez was actually ready for us to do this at our last council meeting,
right?
Which was overcome by events. So here it is.
I make a motion for approval.
Okay, but then we have a second. Okay, we have a motion for approval by Councilman Morado, seconded by Councilwoman Souza. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Rise Engineering for the streetlight conversion. Council Vice President Rodrick.
Mr. President, just very briefly, and then I'd ask, through you, that Director Borges could come forward. But in August of 2014, it was determined that cities and towns could purchase and maintain their own streetlights and work on a conversion to LEDs. Had to work with National Grid. I know Council President Brito, Councilwoman Susan, you were here. Souza, you were here at the beginning of all of that. And long story short, I won't even read my own notes here. I think we finally cut through the process. Don't smile, solicitor. I could be brief at times. So,
No, we're just chuckling how long
Yeah,
and
yeah.
tedious the process has been
yeah, absolutely, I know.
from inception.
So I would defer to, other council members who were here, and Director Borges, if you don't mind giving us the latest. It's good news.
Yeah, I mean, I'm here for any questions. I provided a memo that sort of broke down the timeline with the assistance of Assistant Solicitor Conley. I do have copies of that memo. I know there was some additional information that was not included in the actual agenda. I don't know if you guys would like copies of these, but long story short, I mean,
Since you took the effort to bring it, I'll take.
Thank you. Is that the same thing we already got?
I sent this via email.
I already got it.
Oh, okay, yeah,
I
yeah,
read the
this
whole
is the
thing. That
email.
was a great memo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right here, I got it too. If anyone wants a copy, I've got an extra.
Put it on the back table.
So, I mean, I can give you a breakdown. I've already done so if you'd like some
Do
information.
the highlights. I mean, what does it mean to the public, or what's going to happen to our streetlights? What's
Yeah.
the cost?
Relatively, there really won't be much of a change in the streetlights. We have representatives here that can speak on behalf of some of the technology if you'd like to hear about that. But in terms of the streetlights themselves, I mean, we're converting to LED. They'll be a lot more energy efficient, which will save the city roughly, I don't want to give you the wrong number, about $500,000 a year in energy savings. We had originally worked and contracted with Siemens right around the time that I started with the city in February. We had since decided that the price was somewhat high. Our consultant sort of agreed, and we decided to go back out to RFP, and luckily saved an additional, excuse me, additional $1 million. And that price also included maintenance, which the previous contract did not include. So, I mean, we're getting a great deal, and it's.
And all of this has been agreed to. The court case is all done. That though there were several, I guess.
So basically, the Department of Transportation offered a settlement agreement, not in exactly those terms, but basically made an offer to every single municipality in the state that said, hey, we'll take over the state lights, but we just want you to purchase and convert them first. So really, we're avoiding litigation, which would force the state to take over the lights. And we're paying the upfront cost for the conversion, but realizing that savings from that point forward. I think the kind of back of the envelope estimate on the savings for that for the city of East Providence is $50,000 a year. And that is largely a result of write-outs negotiations with National Grid, which I can't directly say result from our litigation, but it is the exact point that we've been litigating for 6 years now. So we do anticipate realizing a great deal of savings. There's a chunk of money in escrow. There's negotiations on what to do specific to the escrow money, but the escrow money is sort of separate and apart from just the purchase and conversion more generally.
Do we need additional funding beyond the escrow account?
So this project was already funded through a bond. That money is still available to us, I believe, through the State Infrastructure Bank. And a portion of the debate is escrow going to be used for that? But I believe the cost to purchase the lights is about $285,000. And I don't have the cost to convert off the top of my head, but we just realized substantial savings on the conversion as well.
Yeah, cost to convert came in at 1.9. One of the major reasons we selected this contractor is they are accepting the incentives that National Grid is providing on behalf of the city. We'll get those savings immediately where most other contractors were not offering that.
What about the issue where several streetlights were turned off back with the Budget Commission, and we had tried to get some put back on as people would request or complain? Are we back to full?
All the streetlights will be turned back on. Another great feature of this is that we will have control, be able to know at a moment when a light goes out. Rise will be on call and will provide the maintenance and have, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 24-hour response time to get the light back up and running, where, I mean, we fight with National Grid sometimes to get a light going and it takes weeks. So
that's a major improvement.
Absolutely.
And finally, my question, quality-wise, will people notice an LED difference?
So as part of signing on Rise, they will do a pilot program of 10 LED lights throughout the city. So we envision on doing those on Taunton Ave right here in front of City Hall. And then we're going to look for a more residential neighborhood so that we can get feedback from the public. But the intention is to pick a light that has very similar resemblance to what you already see. I know that early on when these conversions happened, some municipalities picked lights that were really bright and white. And that's something that we do not intend on doing. We'd like to keep very similar aesthetic to what you see now so that there isn't a major issue throughout the city.
So, Director Borges, so one of the concerns and reasons why this came about for the LEDs was safety, right? So on roads like Pawtucket Avenue, Taunton Avenue, maybe some sections of Waterman and Warren, commercial, industrial, the need for the lighting being bright was important so that people weren't getting hit by vehicles because of that muted yellow light. So if anybody knows Six Corners, the state put LED lights and has had those up there for quite some time. And so when you're coming down Taunton Avenue, besides having some of the lights off, it is substantially different when you get to Six Corners and the brightness, so you can actually see what's going on. So personally, I think it would behoove the city to still have in major, state roads or high traffic areas that we do have brighter lights and not that muted that we currently have for safety reasons. But in the neighborhoods, I certainly think that having something a little bit more muted, or I know a discussion was instead of every pole being LED'd and bright and flashing in people's bedrooms, that it would be maybe, and I guess this would be part of the trial, is doing like every other or like one across the street, in a diagonal formation. So where you're getting the street lit for safety reasons, right? Still for children, especially in the winter when it gets dark at 4 and kids are still walking home from activities in school in the parks, but not where it's going to, you have to get, blackout curtains in the middle
Yeah,
of the
so
night.
we intend on replacing existing lights. We don't intending on adding any more.
Right.
So the lights that you see are the lights that will be converted.
Right, but I'm saying I think every pole, depending on the level of brightness in a residential area, if it's too bright, would be too bright, right?
So actually in a residential area, you bring a good point. Part of the reason why we've selected this contractor, and a few others also offer it, but we will have the ability to actually dim the lights. And so the savings that you see is based on a 70% output on the light. It's not 100% brightness. So that for one will save on lifetime of the light, but also give us the ability to sort of control and dim. So if you have someone running from the police, I mean, we can pick a certain street and actually bring the lights to full brightness if they're on a foot chase or whatnot.
Right.
So we have the
Or
ability
if
to
it's a
control.
problem area and the neighborhood wants it to be a little bit more well lit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Or around the parks, different parks, they probably at nighttime, Pierce
Correct.
Field, where we want those areas lit. Now, will those lights also be for, is that in the contract? Because that might not be, those aren't technically street lights that are on the city property for parks, but are we planning on maybe using some of that money that we have?
We will
in
be
escrow?
replacing all of the street lights as well as decorative lights in the city. So Bullocks Point Ave is a good example over by Rose Larissa. All the decorative lights on that street will be converted to LEDs. Does that answer your question?
Maybe. I guess if Piercefield lights considered decorative. I mean, I know Warren Avenue
So
has decorative.
spotlights and those lights are not included in this. That
Okay.
would not be included.
All right.
I would say, Councilwoman, I think it's best to get all the lights done instead of doing a diagonal. Then we can always turn some
No,
off.
that's what I
Right.
meant. Like they're all, I
Right.
know they're all going to get done, but I mean,
Yeah.
trialing to see the brightness.
Yeah, because if you can dim them, you
Right.
know.
Exactly.
Keep
yeah.
in mind the one thing that in order to get a lot of the incentives that are being offered, and they can speak to this a little better, but we need, yeah, if you don't mind, Fritzy. We can't play with the lights too much because
Mm-hmm.
under the first few years, that's where National Grid does an assessment that
Okay.
gives us the ability to get the incentives that are
incentives.
being
Understood.
provided. I don't know if I did a good job on that one.
Sure, I can clarify, but I'm Fritzy Pieper. I work for RPM. We were the consultant on this RFP. We were engaged by National Grid to help your community kind of figure this out. So just a little bit more context on the LEDs. They will look different from what you have now, but yes, you have the ability to dim the lights and control them as you want to. Part of the calculation for the savings did include a dimming schedule. So there is a parameter that you'll want to stay within for the most part. Of course, if there's events or sort of one-off things that you need to do, that's not a problem. You'll work that out with the utility at the end. But there are certain parameters that you'll work out through the pilot, and RISE will actually do a full audit of the entire city. They will look at every single streetlight to see, what is the current condition of the light, and they will assess problem areas. They can work with your police department, fire department on areas that have a lot of traffic, where you want more brightness. So those are all things that you'll work out with the vendor in a lighting design before the conversion even takes place. So all of these concerns count as you work through the project, and that's part of the proposal that they put together. We asked them to include a very detailed audit of the city lights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the council? Okay. Would anyone like to proceed at this point in time to make a motion?
Make a motion to accept.
Do we have a
Second.
second? Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract for the purchase of a small dump truck for the Water Utilities Division. Councilman Cahoon.
Let's see if we can make up some time. It's a dump truck. It replaces an old junker. It's $78,000. It's funded with Water Enterprise Fund money.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract amendment for continued assistance with professional services for the strategic assessment of the wastewater operating contract and wholesale service project. Council President Brito.
Oh, where am I? Got the wrong
Page seven.
resolution
Page
in
seven.
front of me.
Page 7.
No, I'm looking for the actual resolution. It's not in here. Thought I had it right here, but this isn't it. Dan, you want to come up and speak about this for a moment?
Yeah.
So I can find my,
Get you a chair.
So as part of the, I'll be up here for a while. As part of the contract negotiations with Suez a few years back, we had hired Arcadis to do that work. As of 2017, we had some significant H2S issues on different metering manholes that accept flow from Barrington. This contract will get us to the final stages of that, and we intend on using ARP funding. Now that we have that money, this is a good time to utilize that and fix the infrastructure at the treatment plant that is deteriorating. I have a presentation that I can share with the council if you'd like that sort of shows some of the deterioration at the treatment plant that we ideally will get tested and fixed in the very near future.
Are those the primary tank?
Thank you, sir.
So that needs to be fixed prior to being capped off, correct?
Yes. But that is also. That is also still in the works on Suez's end. We've actually had a monthly meeting with them last week, and they've identified or hired an engineering firm that's proposed 3 different alternatives for that. So they should be providing those 3 options to the city for selection.
Now, any repairs to those, that structure, does it come out of the, is it combined with the Suez contract as far as capital improvements?
This would not be included, no.
Would any repairs be covered by the ARPA money?
That's what we intend on using. And we've actually, since the H2S contribution is mainly from Barrington, we will be requesting shared cost in that. But in order to sort of expedite this process, get the engineering firm involved, the contractors required, lined up for testing of these structures, it's in our best interest to get this moving.
So hold on one second, right? Because we're asked to approve a resolution to allow the mayor to enter into a contract, which I'm all for. Totally get the reason, right? I'm not sure I'm wild about the idea of using ARP money for this specific project, at least until I see what our plans are for ARP on the whole. I think that money is provided for some very specific purposes that good things for East Providence. I'm not sure I'm sold on the idea of putting it into sewer stuff. So when we vote tonight, are we voting to authorize funds from ARP money to be used for that?
That is what is intended. And I would urge the council to give these 2 women the opportunity to give a presentation that I'm hoping you would hear on the condition of our sewer collection system. I mean, I think that there are some significant issues in this city that need to be resolved immediately. This being one, but in a few moments, correct. In a few moments, if you allow, you will hear another presentation on some major issues we have with our sewer collection system that have not been addressed in the last 10 years. So that's what I have. I mean,
If I can just add quickly, the old Fram commercial, pay me now, pay me later. I went to a site of a collapsed sewer line, and it's a constituent had called me and said there was a sinkhole or a pothole. Well, it was that one that we all saw the pictures of in Riverside. It was about 30 feet deep. And if it wasn't for the quick work of Suez and some of our staff, that entire neighborhood would have had raw sewage, call it what it is, backed up into their homes that night. And we avoided all of that. I mean, we've got some serious problems. And Not so sure, depending on the amount of money, I don't know that I'd be against using the AR.
Totally get it.
But I want the big picture too.
Yeah, I'm just not for using up all this money on infrastructure projects or using even too much of it before we know. I mean, it's a transformational opportunity to use that money to do economic things. And sewer infrastructure is important. It's critically important, right? But nobody buys a house and goes, I wonder what the sewer lines look like, right? And we have an opportunity to change the face of the city if we use that money correctly. So I just don't want to expend it too much.
No, I agree, not too much, but maybe some.
Yeah.
And I
issue,
agree.
yeah, the issue and problem that we have with some of our sewer lines also is because they're not visible to our eyes, we have a tendency of ignoring them. And in this
Just like our water line,
I'm sorry?
just like our water supply line.
Yeah, exactly.
Out of sight, out of mind. No one sees it.
Yeah.
And to take out of the water infrastructure funds, we have to replace that, and that's where the increases in our sewer and water bill come from, correct?
Correct.
So I see two resolutions for Arcadis. One is for 199, and the other one is for 210,000 for 300 linear foot.
3,000.
Yeah,
So that's a survey of North Broadway.
The one we are currently talking about is for structural repairs to influent channel, two headworks, aerated grit tanks, channel system, and the influent box, effluent channels at primary tanks 1 through 4, and 3 manhole structures upstream of the headworks facility at the treatment facility.
So 162,000.
That is,
Wouldn't Suez be able to provide a report as to what's needed and how to repair it?
that's what, by approving this, that is what we would be finding out. We would be doing.
By hiring the company Arcadis.
To
Wouldn't
hire us.
Suez be able to do that themselves, or? But they have their own engineers?
I mean, they could, but it's essentially the same thing that we're doing here.
So if Suez was to do the same thing, we would be paying them the same amount of money?
It would sort of be different because that would have to have been negotiated as part of the contract and identified as part of their capital improvement plan, which it wasn't. So that's.
So how long do we know that this issue, I know you mentioned 10 years of this repair, so this obviously didn't.
This started in about 2017.
So when we negotiated this contract with Suez, there's no way to add that into that as their capital improvements?
That I cannot really speak to because I was not privy to negotiations were happening prior to my start with the city, unfortunately.
We have to open up negotiations, but they're not going to do it for nothing, I would guess.
Well, kind of too late now anyway.
Yeah.
So any funds, okay, so right now, we're seeking the funds through the ARP, but you did mention that we are going to be seeking some assistance from Barrington.
Correct.
But we don't know what that technically.
We're
that
trying to
amount.
negotiate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that fund, those funds would go where? Would we be
I
replacing
mean,
the
they
funds
would
that we
just
can?
come back. Yeah, we would not spend them.
Right, could they potentially come back into where we took them out of? I mean,
Yeah, I
not
mean-
like, obviously, it's not the same, but kind of. So essentially, like, we're loaning out of that fund for this, and then any money that we receive as compensation for the mutual use would then come back into that fund.
If it was a 50-50 split, 50% of this contract would be taken from ARP funds.
Right.
The other 50 would be paid by Barrington, which is something that I'm sure Arcadis would be willing to work with the town of Barrington on.
Assistant Solicitor, is there any way, with these resolutions, and there's at least 3 or 4 that deal with infrastructure, is there any way to add that the funds would be coming potentially out of ARPA into these resolutions?
You can amend a resolution on the floor, yes, and you can make a specific authorization that you're only authorizing funds that come from one particular area or another. What I don't want to speak to definitively is that you have that control unilaterally over ARPA. The way those funds are expended, I don't know. And quite frankly, the Treasury still hasn't issued a final ruling on how those funds can be spent. So for me to definitively say that the council is control of those federal funds, I do not know. You can certainly stipulate that within the resolution. And if that's not the case, if those funds cannot be used, then the administration would have to come back for really the funds to come from some other revenue source.
So with that, I'd make a motion that I don't mind approving. I don't disagree with any of these resolutions, but I do like to see that money come out of that opera. That government money, that's very limited as to what we can spend it on. I get your point, Nate, but it's a great opportunity to fix, some of the issues with our water infrastructure.
This is a wholly legitimate use of that money, right? I mean, this does meet the requirements of that money. Totally. I just not sure I agree with the philosophy of using the money for this. This can be used for that. I'm just not sure I'm there.
So I make that motion to, with adding that the funds, if possible, if, I don't know how you want to word that, Dylan, but.
Restricting the authorization to the use of federal ARPA funds.
And if they didn't come through, then the whole thing is back to square one. I mean, we have to find another funding source.
They're coming through.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll come through. I'll second that.
So we have a motion on the floor by Councilman Morado, seconded by Councilman Rodrick.
That's to amend the resolution.
To amend the resolution as, did you read it out as to how you want it read out specifically? With regard to federal.
I would just add a final clause that says such authorization is limited to the use of ARPA, federal ARPA funds.
Okay.
Councilman, are we speaking just to the current one that we're discussing?
We do need to amend them one by one.
Okay, that was my point. Okay, good. Thank you for saying that.
Okay.
Or clarifying.
That clear enough?
Yes.
Councilman? Okay, and we have a second by Councilman Cahoon. Roll
No.
call.
Seconded
Excuse
by
me, Councilman Rodrick. Roll call, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Vote nay.
Councilman Morado,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye.
So do we have to pass the resolution as amended now?
You do. There's a vote to pass the resolution as amended.
I move to pass the amendment, the resolution as amended.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Nay.
Councilman Morado,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Thank you. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Arcadis US Inc. for engineering and design services to conduct a capital improvement plan on existing sewer distribution system and design services for the North Broadway Interceptor replacement and citywide sewer repairs. Council President Brito.
Thank you, Deputy Clerk. For those of you who saw the presentation that the mayor had, we saw the conditions of those pipes that over on North Broadway. If they're not collapsed, they're totally collapsed. They're about 90% collapse at this point in time. What this does is give the mayor to enter into a discussion or contract with Arcadius to repair that. During that presentation, Arcadius did indicate and show through a camera that went through the lines and what it looks like for those sewer lines that are cracked or in this particular case is just collapse. And Mr. Borges, you might want to even to elaborate.
Yeah, if I may, the IT director, and I'm hoping we can pull that up and give you a brief idea of
How long's the presentation?
15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, not even. We can go quick.
Can you advance? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That would be, sure.
You do.
Now, this is just for coming up with the plan or also to fix the issues?
It's for a plan that will be citywide, and Amy will show you a little bit about that. And then it's also to design and get through bidding for North Broadway, which is roughly 1,000 linear feet. And then we threw in another 2,000 linear feet, assuming there's going to be others like North Broadway that warrant immediate attention.
But not the repair still has yet to be determined what the cost for that is.
Correct, yes, yeah.
Now, my other question, and I don't mean to hold you up on this presentation,
it's okay.
but did we not approve capital funds to repair this section? And where does that lie? And why are we asking for more funds?
Capital funds have not been approved for this. When I came to the city in February, I sort of I've been learning on the fly and trying to understand a lot of the infrastructure needs in the city. I came from 10 years of sewer design background in sewer design prior to coming to the city. So this is very near and dear. This is my expertise. This is where I've spent a lot of my career. And as I started to ask questions and determine what we've done for capital improvements on the collection system, the answer to that in the last 10 years is nothing. We have 14 miles of deteriorated pipe that is either collapsed, ready to collapse, or already collapsed. North being a perfect example of that. Again, I cannot urge the council enough. People don't see the sewer underground until the sewer is in your basement and you are calling the Director of Public Works asking why we have not done anything to rehab.
So I
the
think
sewer
what I was
system.
thinking of was South Broadway. And
South-
the amount in that project we did approve. So this is obviously going in the other direction. So that's where I think
It was approved?
the South. Yeah, it's a different project, South,
Okay.
but it was Broadway.
I'm
So
sorry,
I was,
yeah.
that's why I just looked it up on the map
Understood.
because.
Okay.
So,
Between
yeah.
Massasoit and Center Street.
Right.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
I'll hand it off.
Jennifer Lockmeyer, and I've been before the council before.
Amy Anderson George.
Could you advance through some of these slides and some of these were really just to talk about the basics of a sewer system and what goes into a sewer and how it's different than a storm drain, but we'll advance further down because the council's more interested. But I guess I did want to just show on this one that, so you have, the two different systems and the things from your house are like the toilet, the sink, the dishwasher, those get flushed and that's the last you see of them. And they're going into the collection system and then they go to your treatment plant and then they go to the river. And people, you don't see the collection system, I guess is part of the point of the slide. And it's different than where the stormwater goes. The stormwater is also going to the river. But if we could advance further. Here, this was just showing the different residents where their flow is going. As you know, 75% of your flow goes to the treatment plant that is operated by Suez and 25% goes to the Narragansett Bay Commission. However, you are responsible for all the pipes in the ground. The only exception to that are the giant interceptors that NBC is responsible for. But so you have a lot of the sewers in town. You can keep going. We'll just skip this one. This was just your brief. Some of your counselors were asking these questions, and also as Dan was pointing out that the city didn't always have wherewithal to be conducting the maintenance on your system as you should be, and that's how come in 2007 you had a consent order issued by the DEM, which required you to do the updates to the plant, and so that's when it was most cost effective to go out for the design, build, operate contract. And then you've made a lot of steps since then. But as Dan points out, the collection system itself was never part of that contract. And so you do have the TV tapes that was required. So the background to know what is going on underground was part of their contract. But that was the end of it. So you have negotiated the new contract, and we can keep going. And these were just some of the highlights of the contract, but as some of the counselors were asking, doesn't it include some maintenance? And yes, it does, and it's $1 million in maintenance and capital improvements per year, but that's really just for the equipment at the plant, to keep the plant up to snuff at the end of the next 10-year term. And so you are getting the clarifiers covered. You did also save quite a bit of money in that contract. And then there's a small amount for the collection system, but that's really for emergency repairs so that you guys don't have to get up at night and have somebody come out and deal with an issue at night. And you're going to be quickly overwhelmed if you don't maintain your system.
And there's a savings of 2.5 million?
That's correct, over the term of the contract, yeah. So we'll skip these are pictures of the repairs at the plant. I know we've talked to you before about those, and we were specifically aware that they were not included in the work that was under the Suez contract, either before or now. We can keep going. And I'll let Amy start with the collection system.
Okay. So really what this slide points out is your pipe material, and that's important to know because a majority of your system, more than a majority, almost all of it, is vitrified clay pipe. It's 70 years old. It's starting to crumble. And that's basically your entire system. So that's that slide. Next slide, please. So as part of Suez's contract for the initial 10-year O&M contract, they were required to use CCTV technology to televise all of your sewer pipes, which is awesome because you have those videos, we have all those logs, we have all those spreadsheets and databases. Next slide, please. Which is how we know the condition that it's in. So it was great that that work was done, and it's good that we have those videos, but unfortunately, so this is a PDF, so it's not going to play the video.
Oh, that's okay.
But, okay, next slide, please. That was a video that showed the camera through it. So I guess quickly, what does that inspection tell us? We get a clear picture of the pipe's condition, which is great. We're easily able to see any structural defects as well as any infiltration that's coming in. Groundwater infiltration comes in through a crack. Before you know it, the crack is bigger, and then your pipe collapse. There is a standardized rating system for that. It's called NASCO. What's really good about that is you can compare your entire system on a standard basis and pick out your worst pipes. Pipes are graded and defects on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being minor, 4 being very significant, needs to be addressed, 5 meaning it needs to be addressed right now. Next slide, please. So if you were to, these are actual pictures of inside, a sanitary sewer pipe. These are examples of what would be rated a 4 or a 5. So you've got your fractured pipe, your broken pipe, your collapsed pipe. This is real, this is happening. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at this, I know this is far away. Dan, we can get those blow-up maps emailed out to everybody. Anything highlighted in red there is a code 4 or 5. We have backup videos. We have, like I said, tables and spreadsheets to show that. And if you want to go through the next couple slides.
In red, 4 or 5?
That's right. And this is by ward. So any street that you see here, if this is your ward, there is a sewer pipe segment on that road that is either has a break, a collapse, or a fracture. And we have a backup video for that.
Just for the public, this is on the city website, if I'm not mistaken, or was at one point in time?
It should.
Is it still on there?
It was recorded, so we're in the process of putting it up on the city
Okay.
website. We will get it up there.
Okay.
Yep.
If we were to do all those repairs starting tomorrow, how long would that take?
Years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You can go through the next couple of slides. I have it here by ward. We can get all that. So high level, you have 99,600 linear feet of sewer segments in the city that have a grade 4 or 5 defect, ranging in pipe size from 8 to 21 inches. What we looked at a very high level, you've got 27,000 linear feet that we would consider critically defective that needs to be at least looked at immediately. Can keep going. And we use the North Broadway sewer collapse as sort of an example, one that we know of. We know that it exists. We have some information on it. So this is between Center Street and Massasoit. Go to the next slide. So again, this is a video. So what's very unique about this, unfortunately, won't play. Next slide.
Before it gets away from
Sure.
me, these affected streets this means what exactly? That
So
there's collapsed
not necessarily
or
collapsed,
damaged?
damaged. So it could be
Right.
broken, fractured, cracked,
Right.
but really defective. So for example, if you, I'm just going to say this in generality, you could have a crack that's a not that bad of a crack that might, be fine for 10 years. That might get a code 2 or a code 3. That's why the standardized rating system is good, because you can compare one to the next. So these 4s and 5 defects are pretty bad. They're really bad.
You might have saved paper if you listed the streets that don't have problems.
Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is a couple of still shot pictures. So what's very interesting is you can see one thing, this video was taken in 2014. So if that long ago, can you imagine what that looks like now? This is a very traveled road, frequently traveled roadway. This pipe is actually collapsing on itself. When we first started looking at the video, you'll notice that there's sanitary sewer flow in the pictures. Next slide, please.
Didn't notice that.
If you look at the picture on the right, it's actually gone, and that's dirt. So where is that sewer flow going from the beginning of the video to the end? Because the pipes has become so collapsed. And unfortunately, something like this, you can't use a trenchless technology to fix. This has to be dug. It's gotten to the point where it needs a full dig and replace. Next slide, please. So high level here, what to do now. So first and foremost, you need a plan. We have the videos, we have the spreadsheets. We need to really dive into looking at those videos, seeing what needs to be repaired first, and sort of coming up with a comprehensive capital improvement plan for the collection system. We call that phase 1. We'll make short and long-term recommendations as to how to handle this and what to rehabilitate first. And the second is that North Broadway utility replacement project. The contract that we put out for us includes 3,000 feet of that critically defective pipe. We know 1,000 of it is in North Broadway. We know at least much more than 2,000 linear feet exists, but at least to get going and really, find the worst pipes in the city. Very, very high level. If you're looking at just your 4s and your 5s, that's, 75,000 linear feet at $125 a linear foot for trenchless technology. You're looking at anywhere between $9.4 million to $12 million over the course of the years it would take to get the work done. This isn't, they're not going to go away, I guess. So we go to the next slide. So what happens if we don't fix the pipes? Disruptions in service. You'll notice that your pipes will start to collapse in your neighborhoods and in your communities. You'll have backups into people's homes. As Dan mentioned, odors. Pipe collapses cause road collapses, untreated sewage overflows and backups. But really the takeaway here is then you start dealing with emergency repairs. Emergency repairs are significantly more money than preventative
You
repairs.
probably need a bullet there that talks about health problems, related health
Yeah,
issues.
it's
Right, if we're getting that bad at some point.
Next slide, please. So this just shows you over time. The reason we added this slide is to sort of show, if you look at the first crack there, that's a standard crack. We see them, frequently. They happen. That's not an imminent danger of collapsing. But as time passes and, years go by of them not being fixed, you get from the point of where you could, put a cured in place pipeliner in there, a trenchless technology for rehabilitation, to a pipe, more like in the bottom row, the last 2 that you have to end up digging up the road. These pipes, one quick thing on that, those were examples taken directly from your system. So those are yours. Next slide, please. These are in Riverside. I believe that the picture on the left is the example that we were talking about earlier, the collapsed roadway. And then there was a sinkhole back in 2017 related to a sewer break as well. Next slide. So what do we do now? That in situ lining I was talking about, that's on the left-hand side here. That's where you can actually go manhole to manhole and put a liner or a pipe inside a pipe without digging up the road. It's, minimally invasive. You're not disrupting the residents. It's a common technology that's used all over. And that can be done on pipes that are not collapsed. So if a pipe starts to collapse like this, you can't put a liner inside of it. Once that happens, it has to be dug up.
So if you have an 8-inch diameter pipe
Mhm.
and you put a line in,
Yep.
what size does that shrink that 8-inch to?
Oh, it's very, very
Oh, it is.
slim. Yep, yep.
It's pretty negligible, right? I
It
mean,
is.
The friction coefficient of
Right.
the liner
Mhm.
actually, in some cases, will increase the capacity of that
Okay, so
pipeline when you.
it doesn't shrink the size.
Does not, no. Next slide, please. So how do we pay for this? There's ARPA funding, obviously. That second bullet refers to shared costs with Barrington for the treatment plant, because we talked about the treatment plant at the beginning of this presentation. But really, how do we pay for it? Continued upkeep. A lot of time has gone by where rehab was not completed. So really, it should be funded through annual capital improvements as well as, a sewer enterprise fund, just so we don't get to the point where we are now, where we have a lot to fix all at once. Next slide, please. So, Jen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the request that's before you guys now.
Will your company be able to provide a short-term or long-term, plan as to how we can achieve those repairs and how much it's going to cost with each stage?
Yeah, that's part of the authorization that you guys are looking at right now, the $210,000. That's part of that is to give you a capital improvement plan, and we would be, working in sync with your other priorities like roadway reconstruction, other things, grouping them into bundles, but it would be prioritized. We'll be reviewing all the data that you have collected to be able to make those recommendations and, grouping them in concert with your staff.
To what extent will that plan involve different courses of funding, right? Different funding options, whether they be bond or, different sources of federal money?
Councilman, I'm glad you asked that question. That's why I came down to address your concerns about the ARPA money all being put into infrastructure improvements. We all know that infrastructure improvements are very important to keep the vitality of our city going, but we don't want to use all of the ARPA money into this one project. What we're hoping to get is from this capital improvement program is the design work, the data and the information we need to get the worst pipes taken care of under the ARPA money, if that's all we have. But to make a pitch to our federal delegation to get some of that capital improvement or the infrastructure improvement money that's coming through the infrastructure bill. You were on the call the other day with Senator Whitehouse and Congressman Cicilline. Once we have this capital improvement plan, we bring that right over to them and say, look, these are some serious concerns that we have. We'd like to get additional funding through the federal government. And we'll look at all funding avenues. We're not going to put all our eggs in one basket with this ARPA money and with this project, but we do need to address the worst of the pipes. And when they brought it to our attention regarding that North Broadway pipe, it was incredible to watch the actual video of how the video goes through the pipe and it just keeps getting smaller, 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 and it becomes dry. So somewhere that sewer is going somewhere. It's an urgent situation. It's a heavily traveled road. The last thing we want is a collapse on there and not have traffic to be able to go through or create a public safety issue. But we will look at all funding avenues.
So, but the scope of the capital improvement plan, right, will, effectively inform, you want to do this, it's going to cost this, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And if it's going to cost this, these are really your options for doing big chunks at one time or spreading it out over years or floating bonds or whatever it might be, right? We can expect to see that information from this plan.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Absolutely.
In the example that you make about the problem at North Broadway and where all of a sudden the pipe is gone, and so that sewage is going somewhere, are homes in the area starting to notice, or will they be subject to noticing lack of pressure from sink drains and maybe flushing or?
I don't think there's any correlation to pressure because it all drains out. And the sewer is going somewhere. We just don't, it's going into the earth, which is not healthy over the long-term concern. But the greater concern, as you saw in those photos of the road collapses, are those things inevitably collapsing on the weight of heavy traffic that travels.
And Dan, that one at Arnold Street, that was terrible. That's that photo, yeah.
I just wanted to answer that question. Thank you.
I get it. It's a shovel-ready thing.
Exactly, exactly.
Any other further questions from the council?
I think we have a unique opportunity with this ARPA money. Imagine if you had this type of funding back when we started the roads, paving the previous council. There aren't many areas where you can use this money. This is one of those areas that I know it's still debatable as to, but from what I've read so far, water, sewer infrastructure is one of the major clear-cut, guidelines. So with that, I would like to make a motion that we amend, as we did the previous ordinance, resolution, that such authorization be subject to federal opera funds.
Would anyone like to second that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call?
And if that's the case, that we can't use those funds, then, let's have to find some other alternative.
All right, and under discussion, and I understand fully where Councilman Cahoon is going, I like to see most of that federal opera money for small business and maybe some other homeowner relief. But we've got to start somewhere, and it's been stated that some of these problems are 10 years. I think some go back even more than that. And I have seen many prior councils, not necessarily the recent with Councilwoman Souza or Council President Brito, but I've been around a while, and I watched councils in the 60s and 70s and 80s know they had to do things and put it off, put it off, put it off. I even heard a councilman say right out, I know we need this, but I'm not voting for it. It's an election year, and I'm going to keep costs down, and I'm not spending any money. And what do we have today? Walls collapsing. We have sewage seeping into the ground. We have 80% of our underground pipes and other things that have problems. We have streets that need repair and the whole infrastructure issue, whether it's schools or other buildings. So I don't want to be talked about in the future as a council that had a chance to do something and didn't do it. And it's going to cost money no matter how we look at it, but that goes along how I'm describing my second to your motion, Councilman.
Okay. Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilman Cahoon?
Mayor, I'm going to vote aye, and I just want you to know I'm going to be a pain in the butt about the ARPA money, while we have that opportunity. But I do concur with you. I think this is the right thing to do with regard to the shovel-ready sort of aspect to this. So I
Just
vote
for record keeping, the first motion is to amend the resolution.
And then I'm going to vote for the resolution too. But yep.
Councilman Morato?
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza?
Aye.
Council President Brito?
Aye. Councilor?
For the sake of the record, the amendment is such funds to be restricted to ARPA to the fullest extent possible.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then I make a motion to approve the resolution with the amendment.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon?
Aye.
Councilman Morato?
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick?
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza?
Aye.
Council President Brito?
Aye. Thank you. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract amendment with CDM Smith for continued assistance with the water supply main inspection services. Council President Brito.
Thank you. I'll just be real brief, and I'll let Dan, you could take the lead from here. Just in April 2021, the city entered into agreement with CDM Smith for professional services. The agreement provided engineering services for Phase 1 The cost of this services for Phase 2 is estimated at $70,000. The funds that be used for this is approved for 2021 Water Enterprise Fund.
Yep. So the council is very familiar with the presentation that happened in February. CDM Smith presented on the importance of a healthy water source. So this project or this specific contract will be to continue the efforts in that. CDM will be assisting the city in field inspection, report writing, and actually determining the findings and providing recommendations to the city with respect to the findings. The following resolution after this will be for approval of the contract to actually have, for the contractor performing the inspection work.
And we raised the water rates specifically to fund this particular type of of action.
Yes, this is all part of the water capital.
So with that, Nate, being that we have all of that expense on the sewer side, I was leaning towards the same thing, but I'm going to keep it the same, what we had already previously discussed coming out of the
The
enterprise.
water
fund.
enterprise. Fund,
Correct.
Yeah, yep.
Because it seems like that sewer is going to be,
A different thing.
it's going to be very expensive. So is second.
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract amendment with Pure Technologies for continued assistance with the 42-inch water transmission pipeline pre-inspection planning. Council President Brito.
Okay, again, infrastructure, as we noticed throughout the evening. April 2021, the city entered an agreement with Pure Technologies for pre-inspection planning work required to be performed prior to inspection of the city's main source. The city would like to enter into amending the agreement with Pure Technologies to begin and complete a leak detection, inspection, and conditions assessment of the existing pipeline. The cost of this would be estimated at $884,000. And again, this funding will be used from the water enterprise funds.
And I have a representative here from Pure Technologies if the council has any questions.
So just to be clear, of all those different services that we saw that were potentially available back when we voted, you know, the different robots that go through and stuff, right? This is that ball option, right? This is
There, so in your packet, we will be getting the smart ball. That will be part of technology, as well as free swimming. Jeff, do you want to?
the matrix looking thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
that goes down the pipe.
Worm.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Strajewski. I work for Pure Technologies. You heard me at that meeting via a Zoom call. We're looking to utilize both SmartBall, which Dan was talking about a minute ago, but another tool called Pipe Diver. Pipe Diver was initially designed to look at PCCP, which is pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe. We've also designed a new tool, which we'll be utilizing in the steel pipe sections that you have, because you have both PCCP and steel in the two sections of pipe that we'll be looking at. They use different technologies. They are both free swimming tools, but they will look at any type of, it's basically doing a condition assessment. You just saw some photos looking at the inside of clay pipe. When you're doing water mains, you really can't look at the inside of it and just say, oh, that's a good pipe or a bad pipe, especially when it comes to PCCP. We're actually utilizing electromagnetic technology to evaluate what the pipe wall looks like, what the wires are like on the outside of the pipe, what the liner is like. And we still do utilize some camera work on the inside, but for the leak detection, it's acoustic. We're listening for the leaks and we're listening for air pockets, and that will all go into the condition assessment report.
And Dan, I should ask this, how old, on the sewer side, what's the average age of our pipes? And speaking of clay,
About 70 years, plus or minus.
I don't have any questions.
No, I'd like to make a motion to approve this resolution.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Aye.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick,
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next resolution, please.
Resolution authorizing the granting of a temporary utility easement and Turner Loop trailer parking area related to the Hunts Mill Bridge number 208 replacement project, Group 69E. Council President Brito.
So the state is in process of repairs to the Hunts Mill Bridge. For those of you who don't know, it's right over on Pleasant Street on 114, which eventually runs into Pawtucket Avenue, or continues on into Pawtucket Avenue. But with that being said, they're going to need a temporary staging area to do their work, and this resolution just provides them the authorization to provide temporary staging to perform the work that they need on this bridge.
I move to approve.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Moretto.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Next item, please.
Resolution regarding the disposition of the City of East Providence's interest in tax assessors map 305, block 6, parcel 5.1. Council President Brito.
If I may, Mr. President.
Yes.
So this is comparable to a quitclaim deed that the council authorized regarding 0 Pine Street, I believe in the Newport Avenue area recently. What we have is a vacant parcel that's surplus land. We have a positive recommendation from planning. The planning recommended originally, this is many years ago, that the city take due diligence to clear title before selling. We've spoken to the interested buyer. They will accept a quitclaim deed where we just abandon any interest, and that way we don't have to go through the trouble of clearing title. And I believe the sale was subject to the assessed value. So it's very straightforward. It's identical to the parcel quitclaim interest that we did recently on Newport Ave. And the location of the parcel is, I believe, kind of off a paper
Standish
street in some
Avenue.
people's backyards on
Standish
Standish.
Avenue. So it's on Standish Avenue, which is behind Massasoit. The property owner, actually, it abuts his property, and he's just looking to expand on his property to put this on a tax roll. It's been a vacant area for numerous years. I can't even tell you how many years, to be quite honest with you, and he's just interested in purchasing land from the city.
Can I ask a question on this in relation to, but the assessed value doesn't have to be on the resolution, correct?
It doesn't. It's a matter of public record. Whatever the tax assessed value is what the sale value will be.
And so with Newport Avenue, apparently there's a cemetery on that lot called East Providence Cemetery. How do we know that we don't have any other solution or issues with that we're selling this to a developer that doesn't have anything that, chemicals or burials and so on?
It's a great question. It's one of the reasons why we do the quitclaim deed, where we just say, we don't know what it is and we don't know what we're giving you, but we're out.
Gotcha.
And that's what they're willing to accept.
So in an event that it is hazardous, it's on the purchasers back to clean it up, and not the city.
We're not making any guarantees as to quality of title, quality of property, anything.
Okay.
Any other further questions from the council?
No, sir, I move to approve.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye.
Councilman Moretto.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, thank you. Moving right along, page 9, for those of you following us, ordinances for first passage. Seems like we did 1 and 2. We're on 3. Brings us to the bottom page of page 9.
An ordinance in amendment of Chapter 3 of the revised ordinances of the City of East Providence, Rhode Island, 1998, as amended, entitled Animals, Section 3-2. Summary is this amendment allows chicken/fowl to be considered for approval for emotional support animals. Councilwoman Souza.
So before I get into this, the time is past 10 o'clock, so I just want to extend the meeting half at 30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Second.
If we could just have a roll call vote on that, please.
Councilman Cahoon.
Aye, because poor Renee's been sitting here waiting all night for this.
Sorry.
Councilman Morato.
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza.
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Aye, please proceed.
All right, thank you. So this is an ordinance that expands on what we currently have in the city. So currently in the city, it is prohibited from having any fowl, hen, or chickens within a dwelling or on a property. But that is clearly not the case that's going on in the city. And we do have residents throughout the city, from Riverside to Rumford, who have them, have interest in them, that have not been nuisances to their neighbors, and some that clearly are. So this actually is a one of two part that I've been in discussions with, in talking about behind the scenes to address in the community. So in this particular phase, currently, everything falls under our minimum housing and zoning officers. So they send the violations, notifications, and then it takes that process where the violation is sent, they give an extended amount of time, then they go back and send another violation, and then eventually it gets to the law department and then into municipal court, which can be a very long-winded process, especially when it's causing nuisance to a neighbor or neighborhood. This ordinance speaks to not only addressing emotional support for somebody who has mental or emotional disabilities, but also it gives control to, or some more authority to, our animal control officer, who was previously not in the equation in this ordinance, where he or she then can go out to the site, see what's going on, and make a determination whether or not it is appropriate and what the number is that is appropriate in that area or in that neighborhood or in that home. So it's not just, it's okay, you have to get a special permit for it. It does have to go through a process. You have to show through a physician or licensed practitioner that this is something that you've been treated with. So there's a bit of a process that goes, where currently we don't have a process for anything. So this is what this particular ordinance speaks to. We know that there are people that have different coping mechanisms and have various animals that they consider their therapy animals. I know the ADA only had the animal service is usually dogs, but that's not to say that for everybody a dog is the solution, right? So this is just to go outside of that until it is recognized. And there's a lot of evidence and research that backs some of this for people who need it. The second part of this will be then to start creating boundaries and guidelines that then can help the animal control officer with his role, right? So Councilman Cahoon and I have been to Renee's home, and we've had a meeting there, and there are a lot of valid points that the family and neighborhood makes that we too agree upon, and that's all part of the process, I think, on the second part, because we want to give everybody, their respect on their property and the ability to do what they want on their property within reason, so it's not a nuisance to others, so that everybody lives in peace and harmony. And so that's the second part of working out, square footage, how many, what the best interest for even the animals are, because clearly we're not trying to create a situation where we're, not doing well to the animals or putting them in a situation similar to dogs, right? We went through a dog ordinance where you couldn't be leashed outside for an undisclosed amount of time, and, you had to have a shaded area, so forth and so on. So there's going to be additional supporting legislation to come that, again, sets boundaries and guidelines for anybody that is seeking this special permit to have these fowl or hens on their property. And minimum housing will still be involved. But, the animal control officer has the ability, like any other situation, to remove animals from a property if it is seen to be unfit, where minimum housing officers, zoning officers, they don't have that ability to do so. So I think that's a plus in this situation.
If I may, just very briefly, the legal theory used to determine whether or not it's appropriate for the property is what's known as balancing of the equities. So it's not arbitrary or capricious, which means you can't just say, yeah, you can have it. No, you can't. And any decision as to whether or not someone can have an animal at a property, the animal control officer, including input from the zoning officer, minimum housing officer, is weighing the impacts on the neighbors while weighing the need of the property owner. So, if someone had wanted to keep an alligator next to a preschool, clear no. If someone wanted to keep a moth and the neighbor was 500 yards away, clear yes. So when you start to get in between that realm is when you start to make specific findings as to nuisance, noise, rodents, proximity to the house. Can it be stored somewhere on the property that it doesn't bother the neighbor, and putting those sorts of restrictions in place. Now, those are not laid out explicitly because it's a balancing of the equities test, which means it's an ad hoc application. Every single scenario is reviewed and vetted individually, and the decision is issued accordingly. And if there's a violation or the balancing of the equities no longer favors the animal owner, then the animal can be essentially the exemption which allows the animal to be there can be removed.
I have a bunch of concerns on this. First off, we give people an inch, they're going to take a foot, right? We all know that. We're dealing with a fire pit ordinance, which is great, but I still hear complaints to this day, and we can't really control that as it is, and it's becoming a nuisance. We may have to revisit that one down the road, maybe for certain locations and situations. Having a bunch of chickens in a yard, to me, if the upkeep isn't there, it's going to create a bigger rodent problem. Okay, that's number one. So now we allow these people to get different types of animal, which they'll claim to be, for their PTSD or whatever other ailment. And as you know, I don't know if anyone knows, but there's this long battle in Swansea, Somerset with a horse right now. All right, so now we allow and we get the proper documentation. We have all these animals. We have hogs, we got goats, and now, animal control zoning, they're tasked with going multiple violations. And then let's say they get to that point where they do get to remove that animal. What do we do with this animal after that? I think this just opens a door to a whole bunch of other issues. We just try to solve the rodent issue, with the receptacles, with the recycling trash. And I think that's great. And now we're just going backwards just a little bit by adding, a little bit more. I grew up in Providence, mid-afternoon, Saturday or Sunday, having a barbecue in the backyard. If the dog food was out, you should see the swarm of rats that would attack that in broad daylight with people around. I honestly don't want to see that in East Providence. I don't. I occasionally see a chipmunk. I think it's Alvin or David, but I'm fine with that. But when we start, it's the Christmas Carol. When we start adding, more responsibilities on people, 5 chickens become 10 chickens, 10 chickens become 15. And then, occasionally they'll get a rooster. Then we have to deal with that. We have to call zoning. I just think it opens the door to too many issues.
So in reading about this, and we're being asked to consider specifically chickens as emotional support animals, and the channels through which people have to go through to get approval through this. I'm putting on my half-assed attorney hat here for a second, right? So, all this to me goes back to the Fair Housing Act, and the Fair Housing Act essentially says you cannot deny somebody a reasonable accommodation if they have a condition which could be ameliorated by, that reasonable accommodation. And because so many people in recent years have gone to this is my emotional support animal, this is not a pet, there have been kind of kitchen industries that have popped up that issue certificates acting as doctors that say, yes, here's your certificate, your, whatever, your hamster is a emotional support animal. It's no longer a pet. So your landlord can't tell you can have it. So all of this came down to a document that I found from 2020 where HUD actually issued very specific guidance as to making the determination on assistance animals. And they break it into service animals, which are basically dogs. And we've seen service dogs that can do things for people who need them to do them, whether they be seeing eye dogs or whatever. And then emotional support animals. And the emotional support animals effectively have to be tied to some form of disability, observable or otherwise, that is documented by a physician that says, yes, so-and-so needs this animal to do this, whether it's help them with their PTSD, whether it's do something specific. So I kind of feel like the framework is already there. Whereas if somebody were to come to the city of East Providence and say, I need a reasonable accommodation from the zoning, I have this chicken that does X, Y, and Z, and my doctor says I really need it, or I'm going to suffer. I won't have the same rights and enjoyment of my property as a person without my condition would without this chicken. And that framework to me gives that person the ability to make that case. I worry that monkeying with that at a local level potentially clouds that process. If someone were to come to the city and say, I have a chicken, the chicken does this specifically for me, my physician has documented this, then the city's in really hot water if they say, no, you cannot have that chicken, right? I mean, then you're open to lawsuits and everything else. And that's the way I read everything that I've read. So accordingly, I don't see a purpose for specifically saying, we're going to get involved with determining whether or not it's an emotional support animal. I think the framework is already there for somebody to make the case and to sue the city if the city unreasonably denies them that accommodation.
I'll just say I'll have to agree with Councilman Morado when it comes time for chickens. I've had that issue and concern in my ward. Actually, not even too far from my house. The issue and problem wasn't so much the chickens itself, but what the chickens attract. A resident noticed that they noticed abundance of mice in their house. And the first thing the exterminator said when they called an exterminator, do you have chickens in the area? Are there chickens in the area? And I guess apparently, not through my own experience or my research, but I guess apparently that's one of the things that chicken attract, as mice. So I got maybe a couple calls, not many on this. I would say a couple of calls that people were against this because of the mice that it attracts.
Well, I think it attracts the feed, not necessarily the chicken itself. It's the food that gets laid out for them. Because I know, perfectly honest, I had a bag of bird feed on a flowered pot in my backyard this summer because it was just easier to have it out there in the open and the birds could just play at it. And actually, I saw a rat eating out of it one day when I got home, and I was like, okay, well, that's going in the garage and not outside because clearly they like bird feed too.
And I think
so I think that's what it comes down to is the feeds.
And I think with respect to accommodations, I mean, we already have a law in place that doesn't allow them. So if people's coming here, they already know that, we don't allow them here in the city with chickens. I just think for the most part, for the calls that I got, it's just, this is what they attract. They attract mice. And it's been a nuisance. So although it's one person, it helps, another person, it hinders. And it hinders them through attracting mice and other things, other rodents.
I did a little research. I contacted a couple of municipalities. I contacted a council person from Warwick. They actually had to do an ordinance on bird feeders for that reason, attracting mice, and how people put them out, and that's just a bird feed, and never mind, a bunch of chickens with their feed and everything else all over the ground. So,
and I think in this particular case, we have, if I'm not mistaken, I read the email where the chickens are in the house. If I'm not mistaken,
They were.
They were in the house. I can't,
For months.
I mean, that's what, to me, that's what a coop is for. That's the chicken's house, a coop. But I just think it becomes a real nuisance for the surrounding people in the area.
No, I think it certainly can, and that's why I mean, at the end of the day, people in East Providence have it, and they have had it for quite some time. And I know that there have been less than a handful who have, through, like Mr. Councilman Cahoon talked about, having medical exemptions, now have to go through a process of suing the city to get their, because the city doesn't allow it. So now they have to go into legal thing, and like, do we want as a city to be going through legal costs for something that we can easily adjust on behalf of? Again, this isn't saying that this is, you just automatically get it. There still has to be a process. It still has to be vetted. You still have to go for special consideration. And at any time, it can be revoked. I just think having somebody go through the hardship and additional anxiety and stress and trauma of having to go to court and paying an attorney and going through that process for something that they've been medically okay to have is a little bit disheartening for a resident in addition to. But I understand all the other side of it. And I would want to have everything put in place where it wouldn't be a nuisance for anybody else in the city.
Well, one of the things concerns me is the testimony we heard tonight earlier about maybe a 20-foot long chicken coop, 10 feet wide, maybe close to a property line.
Right, but that's one case out of
Right.
probably, I want to say, maybe 10 people in the city who
But
have them.
it doesn't seem like we've been able to enforce.
Right, but I think, but
situation,
with
and-
this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this allows the animal control officer to then go and enforce, make some enforceable.
We have laws now, we have ordinances now, sheds and things you have to do a certain way and.
Right, but could somebody from the city come onto your property, into your home and remove something from your home?
Well, I guess they can't
Right.
immediately come in physically, but
Right.
after a legal process, if
Yes.
you don't, then they
Right.
probably can.
Yes. But what we're talking about tonight is chickens as emotional support
Right.
animals, right? Not necessarily whether or not we're going to allow chickens in
Right.
people's backyards, right?
Exactly.
So do we make that determination?
Right. Well, I kind of feel like the law is laid out, right? I
Yeah.
mean, a doctor makes that
Right.
determination. A doctor says, you really need this chicken to help you with your whatever. And the city is making an unreasonable denial of an accommodation by keeping you from having that chicken. Therefore, you have legal recourse.
So
And
let
I
people,
guess if there were a bunch of people out there saying like, you're really going to hurt us by taking away our emotional support chickens. I don't know that there's that many people out there that are depending on chickens for their mental health.
I mean, I know people that have chickens and through the years, and I've always heard they do it more as a rural tradition or farming or an ethnic. I've never had anyone say to me, this chicken's my emotional support chicken.
Well, there are, but I mean, there are people in the city who just do it.
And they may say that, but do they mean, I know about dogs and cats and Rory
do it
doesn't
for-
agree with me, I can see, but
People do it for sustainable, they like the eggs and, for
yeah, they like for all that, those reasons,
those
right.
reasons too, but
Farming, that's what I'm
well,
saying.
then I guess I'll just
So
have
what-
to say, and those who have been in violation and received multiple notices of violations, your only recourse is then to go and sue the city to get your accommodation taken care of. So I apologize for that, but
Or, I mean, your legal recourse for federal guidance is to go find a doctor that says you
But if
need
they
that
already-
chicken.
But if they already have that, and the city, per ordinance, if correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't allow it because there is no special permit out for such thing, then the only thing they can do.
But the feds have issued guidance saying that the city cannot deny them that accommodation if there's somebody who said they need that accommodation. I mean, I just don't know what further our ordinance would get us.
I think there's two layers here. There's this ordinance, and there's also an existing litigation, I think, that seeks to define what the accommodation is that the city has to provide and what's reasonable. The proposal of this ordinance is for the animal control officer in concert with the zoning officer, minimum housing officer, to take a certification from a doctor and then compare the need of that person based on that certification relative to the harm and externalities it imposes on abutters, and make a decision whether or not that person should be able to have that animal. That balancing of the equities phenomenon is, it's not necessarily comparable to, but it does fall within sort of the matrix and weighing measures that the federal government would consider in terms of what is a reasonable accommodation. I do think the ordinance is very, very, very flexible in the sense that it doesn't say if you check box A, B, and C, you get to have chickens. What it says is we will consider each application individually, and we'll make findings relative to what are the negatives imposed upon neighbors and what is the level of need. But the city is not designating anything as an emotional support animal. It would be relying upon third-party information in order to consider that.
But I'm saying under federal law, aren't we required to do that anyway? If somebody comes to the city and says, you as a housing provider, city, I have a reasonable accommodation I'm requesting, you must consider it per the FHA. Let me out of this ordinance.
I think I'm not exactly comfortable handing that over entirely, because whether or not someone is a housing provider is complicated. I don't know that the city is responsible for the relationships that when people buy private property. I think if the city was providing the housing, I don't know the specific examples of the litigation that's being handled by the trust. But if the city was providing the housing, the city cannot deny it. If the housing just exists within the city, that may be a different issue.
I'll just say I've heard from one person who is making the contention that the chicken is a legitimate emotional support animal, and that one person just happens to be Renee's neighbor, right? And we know that there's a case there. So I'm really unwilling to tread into that water right now, because I mean, whether you like it or not, there is an ordinance in place, and that, we are in some kind of prosecution mode for breaking of an ordinance. And I think that should be seen through, right? Because to this point, that ordinance has been broken. I am concerned about monkeying with the law at this point and giving avenue and recourse to someone who has not had regard for the ordinance, And I'm not saying anything about that person in particular, but we have laws for a reason.
Isn't there an agency, or does anyone know of a department? I know, for instance, support dogs and some other animals are a legitimate thing, but there are agencies that issue certificates, and now I know some might just be fly-by-night businesses, but there must be out there a legitimate source that allows people to take their usually dog on a plane. And I've heard that even with the FHA and with the FAA, is it, the airlines, they're cutting back now. They're getting stricter on, you can't just take any animal anymore. There were people taking pigs on a plane and saying it's my support animal. And finally, someone in government said, no, we're drawing the line,
I haven't done detailed research on this. It's my rough understanding that for a long time, the ADA recognized many different types of animals, and now they only recognize dogs
as service
animals. And service animals provides very specific benefits and exemptions to pre-existing laws. I do not think emotional support animals are recognized with the same value by government regulations.
And just for the record, this ordinance was something that was started back in April. well before
At least.
that situation even occurred. So it was not,
Right.
it was not that neighbor that prompted this conversation.
Did start it in April, getting her chickens.
Right, but that had nothing to do,
Right,
right,
no,
yeah,
I
yeah.
just- yeah.
You know,
So to try to move this along,
Yeah,
Mr.
so-
Conley, one last question. What, by us approving this or not approving it, what is the net result to the city?
So if it's approved, it allows people to apply to the animal control officer from an exemption from the prohibition to keep fowl in their yard. So it would allow people to keep fowl in their yard, subject to the animal control officer finding that their need for the fowl is greater than the negative impacts caused on neighbors. If the city does not approve it, then people don't have that ability to
Status
get that exemption. It's status quo. There is no fowl, period.
And this is just first passage, so it's
Yeah.
not, you know, this would then give an opportunity for public hearing and people to come who maybe addresses them personally to speak before the council. Again, not necessarily that situation, but those that prompted this discussion and looking into this for the emotional support. So, I mean, I guess it doesn't seem favorable. So I'll go back to the table and try to,
Why don't we, can we table it and maybe try to get some more data and information and hear from more people? And
right, so I'm just gonna, well, we can reach out to those that initially started this and then have them contact the council and, you know, or maybe give them the information about, or let the legal proceedings
Is-
continue.
I mean, evidently, there's been a movement afoot. I got a call 3 weeks ago or so from a Boston Globe reporter saying, how are you going to vote on the chicken ordinance? I said, what are you talking about? I haven't seen an agenda. I don't know anything about it. You know, I know people are
Well, I
talking
guess
about it.
there are neighboring
So,
communities have
yeah.
with serious restrictions. And again,
So I don't want to vote tonight.
yeah, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
If I may, we had an email sent in. It says, "Hi, just wanted to put on record that I am for the change in the chicken ordinance for tonight's meeting. My name is Beth Galligan. Thanks."
Is there, do they provide an address as to?
Did not.
I don't, it's not a public hearing, right?
It's
No,
not a
it's not.
public hearing.
Okay. So why don't we do, so are you tabling it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll discuss it more.
So before we proceed to the end, I think we have one more item on here, new business, mayor's communications, items and communications attached to the docket will be accepted into the record with approval of the council. What is that?
Motion to approve. I guess it's just, it's stuff that was added. What was it, the budget, not the budget,
The expense report and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
stuff
Oh,
in
so
the email.
is that a motion you made,
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman? Would anyone like a second? Okay, roll call vote.
Um,
There you go.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Then we can do it, Jay.
One and two, it was Councilwoman Souza, did you?
She made the
Okay,
motion,
thank
seconded
you.
by Councilman Cahoon.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Cahoon,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
Anyone like to make the motion? to adjourn?
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Roll call.
No, that was the table. Second. If no one has already.
You did it.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilman Cahoon,
Yes, please.
Councilman Morato,
Aye.
Council Vice President Rodrick.
Aye.
Councilwoman Souza,
Aye.
Council President Brito.
You can stay.
That was the first. Aye.
Want to talk about chickens? Okay.
I'll have my skin.
Boy.